golden necklace and jewelry, looking like a joke that she did not know about. And that light yellow fabric was the one that the Shenshins and older sisters bet her to pick. Shen Yu smiled. Fifth younger sister's skin is fair, thus is compatible to pick this shade of light yellow for clothes. It would look lively and lovely on you. Shen Qing repeatedly nodded. That's correct. Seeing the rest of the materials, it seems that the light yellow complement fifth younger sister more. Chen Rushu had a smile on her lips as she kept quiet. There was also a trace of ridicule in Ren Wanyun's eyes. Shen Miao did not know how to choose clothes. Shen Furen was not at the residence all year round. When the mother is not around, the child would inevitably have lots of disadvantages. The other people in the Shen residence all have ulterior motives, and how would they teach this young girl how to mix and match sincerely? Thus in the long run, Shen Miao could only follow Shen Qing and Shen Ke and pick what they say were nice. For example, that light yellow material was indeed complement to her skin, but it looks too cheap and somewhat childish. Coupled with those golden jewelry, she looked like some daughter of a landlord. Gu Yu and rest of them persuaded her to throw away those jewelries, but she was subconsciously stubborn and rushed to be humiliated. This was indeed hilarious. She pointed to one of the blot of brocade and said, then this one will do. That was a blot of lotus purple material, and generally most unmarried females would not choose this material. This was mainly because the lotus purple color was picky and normal females would easily look old-fashioned when wearing this color. If one did not have the aura of grandeur, the color cannot be suppressed and would make one look extremely ugly. Chen Ruchu's eyes slightly flashed as she smiled. Why little five choose such a color? A young lady should wear fresh and bright colors, like your two older sisters. I'm afraid such a dark color would look somewhat old-fashioned. Exactly. Ren Wanyu followed up with her words. Although she also loved to see the first household making a fool of themselves, but this lotus purple color was just too special. If outsiders were to see it, they would think that their Shen family's daughters are all old-fashioned. Qing still need to show off her skills at the chrysanthemum banquet. How can Shen Miao drag her down? But Shen Yu and Shen Qing snickered. Shen Qing said, I see that this lotus purple is also good. Fifth younger sister don't not know how to wear this dark color before. It would be good to try it out. I heard that this color also look extravagant. If I haven't picked a material, I will too want to try wearing that lotus purple color. Shen Yu said smilingly. Li Liang looked at the 2D daughters of the Shen family with honeyed words and hearts of daggers before looking at the calm Shen Miao, and she sighed in her heart. Shen family's first household Shen Zai's daughter was foolish and ignorant, and no one the entire capital not know about it. But who knew that these two Tangji who looked gentle and kind in the outside would actually have such vicious hearts? They actually changed their plans to make Shen Miao look like a fool. She has some sympathy for Shen Miao. General Shen was defending the country, but his own daughter was being schemed by his relatives, and it was rather pitiful. Thinking about that, she politely said, this lotus purple color is indeed too solemn. If it was the chrysanthemum banquet, why not choose some lighter colors? Why not choose this jade white color? Shen Miao glanced at Li Liang. She was indeed a rare sincere person. In her previous life, she also warned her like this, but at that time Shen Miao believed both Tang Jia and Shen Chen wholeheartedly and thus did not listen to her words. Hearing what she said, Shen Miao politely thanked, no need. I like these blot of lotus purple colored material. Her reply made Shen Qing's and Shen Yu's just tightened brows loosen as they were relieved. Shen Yu smiled. Fifth younger sister indeed having good eye. Like this, we would need to bother Li Liang to help us to tailor make the clothes. Li Liang's heart sighed, but she did not say anything more and started to take the measurements of these young ladies. From the beginning to the end, old Shen Furen sat on the reclined couch with her eyes closed, pretending to be asleep as though she did not hear anything in front of her. For matters that deal with money, she was always happy to pretend not to know. The fabrics and tailoring cost would all be out from the common fund, and the money from the public funds would be handled by Ren Yanyun. After taking the measurement for the clothes, Li Liang left. Ren Wanyun then smiled and said, these children are all ladies already, and one must not underestimate the Shen residence's young ladies. I have gotten some jewelries for you young ladies, and they can be used during the chrysanthemum banquet. As she spoke, she instructed Chonglan behind her to take the boxes out and headed one to Shen Qing and one to Shen Miao. Shen Miao's box was rather heavy. Ren Wanyun looked at her and spoke in an exceptionally loving tone. Second, Shen saw that you were busy for the past few days for Guang Wentang's academy examinations and got the jewelry made when I was shopping. They are all made with the best styles and hope that you will like them. At the highest seat, old Shen Furen's brows wrinkled and she seemed to want to open her eyes, but then paused and continued to pretend to be asleep. Thanking second Shen Miao also returned her thanks. Shen Qing and Shen Yu could pick their own jewelry and get it sent back, but when they went shopping, they did not take her along and still call it with a glorified name of unwilling to disturb her. Finally, to complete the entire act, they gave her some which would be too late to be changed. Then let's go back first to take a look. Shen Yu pulled Chen Ruchu as she winked at Shen Miao. Fifth younger sister's jewelry must be the heaviest. Shen Miao smiled and did not say anything. Returning back to West Courtyard, Shen Miao drew the box aside without taking a look inside. When Jin Jie saw it, she curiously asked, why does young lady not open and look? Why is there a need to take a look? Would there be any difference? Shen Miao answered without even looking back. Jing Jie was hesitant with her words. Every time when jewelry was received from the second and third household, her young lady would love it so much, but even them servants could also see that these jewelry were just too vulgar. Shen Miao had been led around by the second and third household and thus love all these tacky gold and silver stuff. Shen Miao thought for a bit before reaching her hands to open that box up. When it was opened, the golden light shone out. What was placed inside was a gold and silver bracelet and collar necklace, and there was even a hairpin with a big ruby mounted at the time, but the quality was very poor. Jing Jie could not help but reveal a trace of anger. Shen Miao lost her smile. Before she got married, all her jewelry were like these. This kind of golden and silver collared necklace, even the young ladies in the villages would not wear them. Every time she would wear brightly colored clothes and then put on these golden jewelry, looking like a moving box. In the presence of the gentle and graceful Shen Yu and the bright and magnanimous Shen Qing, she looked just like a feet-washing maid. Now Shen Miao felt the things in front of her was just ridiculous. Jing Jie observed her own young lady and was surprised that she did not reveal the same excitement that she had in the past. In her surprise, she saw Shen Miao closing the box and pushing it to Jing Jie, pawn it away at a pawn shop and buy any silver hairpin on the way back. It need not be too good. Just some flower carvings would do. Young lady, Jing Jie said surprisingly, if the people from Eastern Courtyard found out that it was pawn away, it would inevitably use as a case. Even though she was happy that Shen Miao finally did not love these gold and silver things as before, but such actions were indeed too bold. These jewelry already cannot be worn, so what is the point of keeping it? It would be better to pawn it for money, as it would always be more convenient for things to be done normally. Shen Miao lightly answered, everything should be done practically, and that this her principle when she was the empress. Shen residents would provide a monthly allowance accordingly, and each young lady would get 2 liang taels a month. However, how much subsidies does Shen Yu and Shen Qing actually get? Shen Miao did not know, but one thing can be certain was that she did not have any share of subsidies at all. She was clearly a lady from the general's residence, but was not as generous as her 2 older sisters. Previously she used to think that it was second and third Shens who were willing to supplement their daughters, but how about now? The common fund was controlled by Ren Wanyan, but because of the need to put things in order in Shen Gui's and Shen Wan's work and their salary was barely enough, how would there be excess money? It was Shen Shin's. Because he used his own life, blood and sweat to fight in the battlefield, His Majesty would bestow rewards and Shen Shin never misappropriate these rewards and gave all to the common fund. Holding on to the money from their household but treating her like this. Such shameless people can only be found in that old Fern's family. She must find a way to separate the family out. The chrysanthemum banquet in the 68th year of Mingqi eventually came. Guang Wentang was different than before as the academy examination became a contention of talents. Only the person with the highest talent would be able to stand on the stage to challenge their fellow schoolmates. This would enable the youths to be infused with vitality and for others to see that the students of Guang Wentang each had their own merits. Both the male and female students would be on the same stage and not like the past where it was generally divided into groups of male and females. If one like, a female can challenge the male in horse riding and shooting and males would also challenge the females for scholarly arts. However, such scenes were indeed rare. Early in the morning, the Shen residence was in a buzz. In the west courtyard, Shuangzhang carefully inserted the silver hairpin into her hair and smiled. Young lady, it is done. Shuangzhang was the best in styling one's hair. Previously Shen Yu wanted her over at her side to style her hair, but Shuangzhang was a maid that Shen Fu Ren personally picked for Shen Miao and Shuangzhang was not willing, thus Shen Yu had no way out. Young lady really look extremely good in this outfit. Bai Lu smiled as she looked but then said with some hesitation, but it is a little plain around the head area. Shen Miao's hair was very black and thick and with Shuangzhang styling it to a cloud bun, it looked elegant and chic. Even after reaching a marriageable age, Shen Miao still put her hair up in a pair of looping top knots, thus with this change of style, it seemed that she had grown up a lot. That round adorable face seemed far more graceful and there was finally a hint of a young lady. There was just a silver hairpin inserted lonely in her hairstyle, which looked quite pitiful. Gu Yu could not help but to show some anger on her face. The Shen residence was great and renowned but however did not have a set of decent jewelry. The entire Shen residence all depended on Shen Shin but did those cruel and unscrupulous thing. Unfortunately Shen Miao was unable to say anything. Why? Because they were the one who custom made it for Shen Miao and it was just vulgar gold jewelry that if one were to wear, it would be a joke. Shen Miao only had to glance at Gu Yu to be able to guess what Gu Yu was thinking and could not help but to shake her head. In fact, since young, the second and third household of Shen family had cracked their brains in order for her to develop bad habits and did everything possible for her to believe that these gold are the best. Thus from the public, it was not that the second or third household that deliberately embarrassed the daughter of the first household but because that person originally loved such shiny gold. Seeing Shen Miao not getting tired and wearing those exaggerated jewelry, everyone would reach to a common thought that the daughter of first household of Shen residence was greedy, loved wealth and was snobbish. Even though gold was good, but there was no need to wear it on one's body. Gu Yu was afraid that Shen Miao would feel sad and quickly change her words, but Li Liang's skills are truly really good. Young lady look really beautiful. They did not know if Li Liang pitied Shen Miao from her bottom of her heart, but this set of clothes that Li Liang brought over was surprisingly exquisite embroidered. It took into account that her small appearance and even though the green color was somewhat solemn, there were large embroidered flowers at the hem of the dress which was so lifelike, beautifully blooming. It was indeed beautiful. Shen Miao also felt that it was fitting to her body and did not feel or look any bit of discomfort. Shuangzhang and Bai Lu exchanged a look and saw surprise in one another's eyes. Currently Shen Miao could even restrain such a heavy color like this. They really did not know how was this the case. Let's go. Shen Miao stood up, one cannot wait for too long. Just when they were out of the courtyard, they saw the begonia flowers blooming, one bigger than the next. She stopped and pinched one small flower and inserted into her black hair and it was like adding flowers on brocade. Young lady is really good looking. Gu Yun praised. Gui Momo just came out from the small kitchen and had prepared some snacks for Shen Miao to eat in the carriage. As she was carrying the basket out, she saw Shen Miao and could not help but be startled at the sight. She had waited on Shen Miao for so many years and Shen Miao grew up with her milk, thus it can be said that she watched Shen Miao grow up. But now she felt that Shen Miao was a complete stranger. She had a calm and steady manner, coupled with the noble lotus blue color, there would be no doubt if one were to say she was a princess. She almost did not hold the basket tightly and just stood on the spot looking silly. Until Bai Lu called out with a smile, Gui Momo, what does this look for? Gui Momo was surprised for a moment and habitually wanted to say a few beautiful words but suddenly remembered that today was the chrysanthemum banquet. If Shen Miao attended it this outstandingly, then Shen Yu and Shen Qing would be pushed down. She swallowed the words of praise that were on the tip of her tongue and turned around with a worried look. Young lady, the color of these clothes are just too serious. Young lady is still young, why wear such a color which would cover one's natural tone? Wouldn't it be better to wear that peach-colored jacket that is embroidered with a spray of flowers and magpies? It would look much better. And about this hairpin, this old servant remember second Fern had conferred quite a number. Like that, no one will say that the young ladies from the general's residence would be so plain and simple. Gu Yu's lips twitched. That peach-colored jacket that was embroidered spray of flowers and magpies was given by Ren Wanyan. Not only was the color tacky, coupled with gold and silver jewelry to be worn, it was like a young lady from a local wealthy landlord. Shen Miao would definitely be laughed at if she were to go to the chrysanthemum banquet in that today. Obviously Gui Momo had bad intentions. Just as she wanted to reprimand a few words on Shen Miao's behalf, she heard Shen Miao's gentle voice. Currently Mingqi is enjoying peace and prosperity, and the common folks live and work in peace and contentment, but His Majesty advocates on thriftiness. The principle of the world is not to take advantage of extravagance and waste. Is it not good to be plain and simple? If others were to see, one would say that my general's residence is upright, honest and conduct proper family principles. This would be a good thing. So one would not need to care about clothes at all. Shen Miao's lips raised. Today's purpose is to appreciate the flowers and people are contending with their talents and these have no relation to how one dress. Her words were gentle and cordial but there was an unquestionable imposing manner. Gui Momo's mind erupted in chaos. She did not fear Shen Miao's temper but since when could Shen Miao speak to her with all these grand principles? Shen Miao normally did not like studying and was thus dumb. But now to spout out such grandeur of principles, that made Gui Momo, someone who did not study before, not know how to refute back. Bai Lu could not help but burst out of poo as laughter escaped her. She quickly kept quiet and kept a straight face but her brows was unable to cover up the fun she had. Gui Momo wanted to refute but unable to do so and was made a fool in front of these few maids thus she felt vexed but she was unable to understand why upon her return to the residence this time, she would always be at a disadvantage whenever she talked to Shen Miao. To say sharp-tongued, Shen Miao's tone was very mild. To say she was gentle, each word would render one speechless. Gui Momo somewhat embarrassingly handed the basket in her hands to Gu Yu. This are snacks for young lady to much during the journey as there is a distance to the chrysanthemum banquet and hope young lady would not be hungry. She directly said to Shen Miao, this old servant will return to the courtyard to work. Go then, Shen Miao replied in a flutter. When Gui Momo left, Gu Yu and Bai Lu was rejoicing. The stronger Shen Miao was, the more she had the appearance of a mistress. Like this, those people who had no eyes in Shen residence would not dare to bully her. As she reached the doors, one could see the 2 horse carriages parked at the entrance. The first carriage was getting ready to set off while the second one was empty. Shen Qing's maid, Chun Dao, stood in front of the first carriage. When Chun Dao saw Shen Miao, she quickly approached the carriage and spoke to the people in the carriage. Afterwards, the curtain of the carriage was pried open. Shen Yu and Shen Qing were inside and Ren Wanyan and Chen Rushu was there too. The 4 of them saw Shen Miao's appearance and could not help but be astonished. Chen Rushu's eyes flashed but Ren Wanyan frowned instead. Little 5, why are you wearing so plainly? Exactly, Shen Qing could not wait to speak, it really looks ugly. It is better to wear in brighter colors. I still have a new bright yellow dress in my room. Chun Dao, bring 5th younger sister to change it to that clothing. And what about jewelry? If one did not know, one would think that the general residence had ill-treated you. She secretly suppressed the jealousy in her heart. Actually, Shen Qing was also considered a delicate and attractive female. Coupled with the magnanimous and bright occasion, one would see that she was a proper noble young lady from a reputable family. But there was only one thing that she was most concerned about, was that her complexion was not fair enough as it was somewhat in the shade of wheat. For a female, everyone would want their skin to be as fair as snow. Shen Yu's complexion was fair and she did not dare to say anything. But Shen Miao's complexion was fair and with the lotus purple clothes, it made her skin look as white as snow. As such, among the 3 daughters in the Shen residence, her complexion was the darkest and naturally she was uneasy about it. Shen Yu examined Shen Miao very carefully and saw that she had styled her hair to a cloud top knot which was exquisite and with the matching lotus purple clothes, she looked exceptionally dignified. Today, she did not wear any of those gold and silver jewelry. Even though it was plain, there was an air of nobility. She smiled, 5th younger sister, not mentioning the clothes, one must definitely wear jewelry as this concerns the reputation of our residence. Grandmother would not be happy with your current appearance. Furthermore, why do you style your hair as such? You are currently not old, thus the previous double ring hairstyle is very suitable. Gu Yu was so angry that her face turned a little white but she was a servant and could not go against the mistresses. She was gnashing her teeth as she thought, these second and third households harbored sinister motives and would not hesitate to harm their own niece. They could not wait for Shen Miao to wear as uncouth as possible. Shen Miao sneered in her heart, Shen Yu even used old Shen Furen, as she knew that she previously afraid of the dignity of the old Furen the most. As for her hairstyle, Shen Yu was only older than a year than her and how can she speak about being young? She herself had her hair up in a flying immortal hairstyle with a pink dress which was very light like a fairy. She wanted to be a talent so why should she compare? They finished talking but Shen Miao kept quiet and only smiled at them, and they did not know what she was thinking. Finally Shen Qing felt uncomfortable with that look and snapped at the maid standing by the carriage, Chun Dao, what are you standing there for? Still don't bring 5th younger sister to change her clothes. Not required. Shen Miao interrupted her words and put up a timely sorrowful demeanor, there is a reason for today's appearance. I especially like the jewelry that second Shen gave to me and intentionally did not wear them. A few of them look at each other and did not understand Shen Miao's meaning. Gu Yu and Jing Jie also look at one another before looking confusingly at Shen Miao. Father is currently far away in the northwest region, leading soldiers into bloody battles. The Shangbu have yet to retreat and the soldiers wear cold amours while I am here in the capital wearing brocade garments and enjoying jaded meals, being carefree and enjoying the tranquility as I appreciate the flowers and compose poems. I am truly ashamed. Shen Miao slightly bowed her head as her voice lightened. Last night Bodhisattva entered my dream and wanted me to pray sincerely. Thus I have decided to wear plainly with lesser colors until father returned back and no longer wear bright clothes or jewelry. No one expected that Shen Miao would suddenly make such a speech. Normally her words were spoken so timidly that it was unclear, let alone could she speak with such punctilious words eloquently. Shen Yu and Shen Qing were so surprised that they could not speak while Chen Ruchu held her head as if deep in thought. It was Ren Wanyan who was embarrassed. Shen Miao words sounded that she alone prayed sincerely for her father but what were these Shen family doing? But she definitely not want her Qing'er to wear such plain clothes to attend the chrysanthemum banquet too. Ren Wanyan gritted her teeth and persuaded lovingly, even it was like this, you are also a young lady and did not have to think about such heavy thoughts and relax during the chrysanthemum banquet. But Shen Miao suddenly gave a big bow to Ren Wanyan, beseeching second Shen to fulfill Shen Miao's act of filial piety. They were standing at the main doors of Shen residence and there were many passerby. When Shen Miao gave such a big bow, many of the passing people could not help but cast a curious eye towards them. Ren Wanyan could let Shen Miao wear beautiful clothes to maintain the reputation of Shen residence, but Ren Wanyan dare not fulfill Shen Miao's act of filial piety. Their own family's eldest brother was in the battle in the northwest region. Not considering that they themselves did not pray for him, what kind of intentions did they have for not allowing his daughter to fulfill the act of filial piety? Ren Wanyan's face suddenly turned green as she did not expect Shen Miao to reply like this which made her so suffocated as she was unable to refuse. Ren Wanyan quickly let Chun Dao support Shen Miao up and said, this child. How would second Shen not fulfill your act of filial piety? It is tough for you to have such a mind like this at such a young age. Never mind, dress plainly then. Shen Qing was still somewhat not happy about it but did not refute her mother's intentions. Both Shen Yu and her mother seemed to understood something and when they look at Shen Miao again, their vision was different. However, Ren Wanyan smiled, our carriage is currently full. Let the steward prepare another one specifically for little 5. It would also be spacious. Little 5 will follow after the second carriage and head out later. In every chrysanthemum banquet, Shen Miao would ride in a carriage with both mother and daughter pairs. It was just an additional person, how can anyone unable to squeeze in? To have such an attitude today, it must be deliberate. Ren Wanyan also had her own thoughts. Shen Qing had reached an age to look for marriageable partners but Shen Qin's official ranking was higher than Shen Gui, thus those higher ranking family would consider Shen Miao first. Since Shen Miao was foolish and dumb, if there was no one guiding her, most probably she would make a fool of herself. Only with that, can Shen Qing's magnanimous be outstanding. So she had deliberately prepared 2 horse carriages. Chen Ruchu and her daughter was playing with her so she would naturally not refuse it. Alright, we'll do as instructed by second Shen. Shen Miao said with a smile. Ren Wanyan was somewhat flabbergasted as she did not think that Shen Miao would agree to it so easily. Shen Miao has always been timid and previously would always stick with Shen Yu and Shen Qing. She thought that it would be difficult for her to sit alone in a carriage and did not think that Shen Miao would simply not refuse. As a result, the words that she had previously prepared was made redundant. If there is nothing the matter then Shen Miao would go up to the carriage first. She quickly gave her greetings to the 4 of them and went up her own carriage. That carriage was also considered spacious but was not as refined as Ren Wanyan's one. Gu Yu said angrily, not mentioning about letting young lady sit alone in a horse carriage but also to let one travel behind. What kind of intention is this? Jing Jie glanced over at Shen Miao with a look of concern as she sighed softly in her heart. Shen Miao's slight stared deeply onto the candied confections as her hands gradually clenched. They want to ruin the reputation of the first household and deliberately extending the distance between the first household so that when she was laughed at, Shen Qin's name would be blackened. She would like to see at the end who will be the one that would feel suffocated. The chrysanthemum banquet was held in Yanbei Tang, which was located near the Qin-ranking prince's residence, and it was the hall where the founding emperor and empress personally set it up. Thus the former mansion was exquisitely pruned and covered several acres with magnificent buildings. If it wasn't that it was far away from the city, the emperor and empress would want to transform it to part of the palace. With the mountains on one side and water on the other, it was indeed a good place to enjoy the scenery. In particular, in every 10th lunar month, different types of chrysanthemums would bloom, and because the place was managed well and had the possession of different chrysanthemum seeds, when they bloom, the entire place can be considered as very elegant. The carriage would take about 1 shichen from Shen residence and Yanbei Tang, so snacks would be prepared so that one would not feel hungry. Gu Yu opened the basket that Gui Momo brought over and asked Shen Miao, "Young lady, better eat something. The journey is long and one will have strength if there is something to eat." Shen Miao looked at the things in the basket. Cold goat geese, scallion rolls, spicy and oily drumsticks. At first glance it would make one's mouth water as it was colorful and savory. Unfortunately the flavor of these things were just too heavy. Like the cold cheese and spicy and oily drumsticks were easy to move the lip rouge, and if one was not careful, it would be easy to make one's clothes dirty. Gui Momo really put in utmost care when preparing these food. The courtyard battle between females was about some tricks that was done in the dark to make others stumble. But Shen Miao was previously in the inner palace of Mingqi and her opponents were the concubines who were fighting for favor, thus the stakes were much higher. These kind of tricks were really nothing at all. She shook her head and let Gu Yu cover the box up and spoke to Jing Jie, "No need. Jing Jie, have some." Jing Jie carefully took out a small cloth bag from behind that held small and exquisite pastries. Shen Miao did not trust the kitchens in Shen residence and let Jing Jie bribe the steward to help her buy some snacks from outside. The steward only thought that Jing Jie was greedy and did not add anything to the food. That steward was only somewhat surprised that Jing Jie, a maid, would be actually willing to buy snacks from Guang Fujai. Guang Fujai was one of the best pastry shop in the Ding capital that even the concubines in the palace loved to eat it. In Shen Miao's previous life, she was not very interested in Guang Fujai's snacks, but Wan Yu loved it so much that she would not be happy if she did not eat it for a day. At this moment the snacks was only about the size of Shen Miao's finger and was made to look like flowers, which was very cute and adorable. Shen Miao distributed some to Gu Yu and Jing Jie to eat. Both maids initially did refuse, but after Shen Miao's insistence, they was unable to continue refusing and ate a mouthful before saying in surprise, "Young lady, this snack is really delicious." Shen Miao smiled. Actually, no matter how delicious can the snacks may be, it only need to be made elaborately and cutely, as females would always like good-looking things. When Wan Yu had the marriage alliance, she spent a lot of money to buy Guang Fujai's pastry master, as she hoped that Wan Yu was able to eat her favorite snacks when she was in the bitter cold country of Xiongnu. Who would know? Who would know that in the middle of the journey Wan Yu perished and she was unable to even see her body? Shen Miao closed her eyes. Wan Yu's marriage alliance was instigated by Mei Furan and colluded with Chen Roxi, that family, but was ordered by Fu Shuyi. In this lifetime, not one of these people should think about running away. She want these people who caused Wan Yu's death to pay back hundreds and thousands of times. Gu Yu was eating the snacks in relish when she looked up and saw Shen Miao's cold and chilly look, as if it was a noble lady in a high position having a killing intention. In that moment, Gu Yu seemed to have seen Shen Shen's shadow. Shen Shen was someone who had killed others and seen bloodshed in the battlefield, thus when he became angry, the ferocious came from his bones. At this moment the look in Shen Miao's eyes was exactly the same as Shen Shen's. She almost choked on a snack and had to swallow it down strenuously before asking carefully, "Is young lady uncomfortable anywhere?" No, Shen Miao's eyes drooped, was thinking about some things. Fu Shuyi would also be present in today's chrysanthemum banquet. Not only Fu Shuyi, there would be several brothers of Fu Shuyi would be present. There were currently 9 princes with each their own merits, thus each of them had their own camp. But Fu Shuyi had the most harmless appearance and had slightly better relationship with the crown prince's faction. Who knew that at the end the crown prince was ousted and Fu Shuyi was the heir apparent? She did not intend to help the crown prince, as the imperial family of Mingqi was the most ruthless. They see all those vessel families whose ancestors helped to found the empire as an old dogs. It was these dogs had helped them to hunt down the rabbit, but when the rabbit was in the bag, they were worried that their dogs would kill them, so they drained the dogs to the last drop of blood before killing and cooking them. The world was heartless. The heir to the throne was not just. So on what basis was there to require the loyalty of everyone? Why not watch how a dog would bite another dog? Shen Miao's lips slightly hooked up. There was a number of noble family who had arrived at Yanbei Tang. Although in today's academy examinations would not differentiate males between females, the banquet divided the guests by female and male seats. At the male seats, many youths and their father quickly greeted one another, as it was natural to build up relationships between families to support one another. As these youths would one day take over their fathers to support the entire family, more friends were always beneficial. The female side would not frequently meet up as the males, thus the women often gossip among themselves and the young ladies would have their fixed group of friends. As they would chat together in every 3 to 5 days, they were both nervous and looking forward to the chrysanthemum banquet. They would also occasionally look up and glance across the area to see one's admired youth. Yi Pei Lan fiddled with some small flowers as she said, "Do you all have confidence in the academy examinations today?" "I do not have." The female beside her smiled. "There are so many people and I am mediocre at best, thus I am really scared. I only hope that later I would not be drawn out or chosen in a challenge by anyone. I don't seek to stand out and only not to make a fool of myself." Yi Pei Lan's mouth twitched. "One must at least try. As everyone know, His Highness Prince Ding would also be present, and moreover your admired young master Li would also be here. The young master of the Li family's language skills are exceptionally outstanding and would definitely come on the stage. Shouldn't you take this opportunity to perform well?" The young female pushed Yi Pei Lan as her face revealed some shyness. "Don't say nonsense." Zhang Xiaozan heard what was said and smiled. "Exactly. By way, you must not be afraid. If one were to say about making a fool of oneself, there would still be the Shen family's number 5 to be at the end of the spectrum. Seeing that, you are much better than her." Precisely. Yi Pei Lan also smiled in amusement. During the yearly academy examinations, that 5th Shen would be responsible for provoking laughter, and it is tough for her to still come every year. When I think about how she is going to show off her work this year, I would want to laugh out. Really don't know that she would wear again. Would it be like last year's terribly bright red dress with purple gold hairpin? A number of young females started giggling. Enough already. Feng and Ning suddenly opened her mouth. What's so funny about it? Yi Pei Lan was surprised for a moment before she said, "Feng and Ning, you seemed very strange recently. Why are you so good with that fool?" Feng and Ning had a look of anger and was about to speak when she heard someone speaking from the other side. "The Furans of Shen family have arrived." Yi Pei Lan's mother, Yi Furan, had a better relationship with Ren Wanyan, and Master Yi and Shen Gui mutually took care of each other in court. Occasionally Ren Wanyan would also bring Shen Qing to the Yi residence for a visit, thus Yi Pei Lan and Shen Qing had the best relationship and was also good to Shen Yu. At the presence of the women, the male side of the banquet all looked over. Shen Gui and Shen Wan was busy with government affairs lately and most likely was unable to come. But the reason why they look over was not for Shen Gui and Shen Wan. In any case, the formidable great general Shen Qin was very high ranked in the imperial courts. When the late emperor was alive, the Shen family had a lot of privileges and was worthy of the name of being in the emperor's inner ministerial circle. Whoever had the military power was qualified to speak. Even if Shen was often not in the capital, if one mentioned about the Shen family, everyone would be respectful. Thus Shen Gui and Shen Wan had a smooth sailing career mainly because of their eldest brother's power. The men look at the Shen family, as they were watching a powerhouse family and the formidable military leader. The females look at the Shen family as though they were a joke. It was still alright among the Furins. After all, even if they felt contempt in their hearts, they would still say some perfunctory words, but the young ladies were different. Perhaps there was some jealousy as Shen had only one daughter and thus Shen Miao is Shen Xin's daughter. Her status was naturally different. It can be said that it was comparable to a princess. And such a genuine noble daughter was an absolute fool. Stupid and ignorant and was so timid and weak in her love of Prince Ding, Fu Shuyi, had created a lot of jokes. Unfortunately, the falling flower yearned for love but the heartless brook ripples on and everyone knew about it. Let alone standing together with such outstanding two Tangjis, one would look more like a countryside girl. Don't know what kind of good show we will see today. His Highness Prince Ding would be present so Shen Miao would definitely dress up meticulously. Yi Peilan covered her lips and laughed. Don't you not think that it would be even funnier during the academy examinations? With Shen Miao's no brains, she would take the initiative to go up on stage. At that time, it would only be exciting. Zhang Xiaozan followed up with laughter. Bai Wei sighed and shook his head pretentiously, did not know what sins did General Shen did in his previous life to have such a daughter. Just as they were talking, one could see a group of people led by a female servant walking into Yan Bei Tang. The people who was walking impressively right in front was Ren Wanyan and Chen Ruchu. Ren Wanyan was wearing gold gilt soft cotton robe. She was naturally on the plump side and with her hair up on a yuan luo bun, she had a dignified appearance of wealth and had the air of a matriarch of the family. Chen Ruchu was different. Even though Shen Yu was 16 years of age, she was still like a young married woman. She wore light pipa green gauze dress and with one glance, she would be thought of being a gentle woman from a scholarly family. Behind both of them was Shen Yu and Shen Qing. Shen Yu wore a pair of light pink and plum long skirt and her long hair was up in a flying fairy style, decorated with pink pearls. The color of the pearls are exceptionally good that could attract others glazed to it. Shen Qing, beside her, was wearing a peach blossom red robe that had flowers scattered, was in dazzling color and coupled with a baiwa hairstyle, made her look energetic and cheerful. The jade pendant that was hanging on her waist was translucent and clear. One look and one would know that it was extraordinary. Both of them were young. One was beautifully gentle, the other was magnanimous. The clothes they wore were worth a lot of money and they were already quite good looking, but clothes make the man, thus many youths turn over to look. At the male side of the banquet, one Darren could not help but praise, the daughters of the Shen family are all good looking. There is still one. Kai Lin saw his favorite Shen Yu and was delighted, but he could not help but sneer. Shen family still have a daughter from General Shen, who is the best looking. That Darren did not seem to care about the rumors circulating and did not know about Shen Miao's critique, so when he heard Kai Lin's words, he thought that it was true. General Shen's daughter would certainly not be lacking. Ah, Kai Lin could not help but laugh and pointed readily towards Shen Yu's group, isn't that? He did not finish his words but swallowed them down. He saw that there was still one person walking behind Shen Qing and Shen Yu. She did not walk together with Shen Qing and Shen Yu but walk behind alone. This originally would not look good and one would cower and tremble in fear, but for unknown reasons, there wasn't the lightness of insignificance. Dark gold embroidered silk with a moon tail, there were large embroidered begonias on the skirt like they were blooming beneath her feet. As the young lady walked, flowers bloom with each step as she moved elegantly. And this young female most likely felt cold as she was covered with a lotus purple silk cloak, which instantly contained the flower patterns and highlighted the majesties of it. As she walked nearer, everyone could then see her face clearly. It was just a 14 to 15-year-old young girl who had her hair up in a simple cloud bun and there was only one silver hairpin that was inserted in it. At the end of the silver hairpin was a small begonia which brightened the outfit instantly with a touch of color which made her quite moving. Her complexion was naturally fair, thus when she wore the lotus purple dress, it made her skin look creamy and that pair of eyes was crystal clear and shining like they belonged to some young cub. There was a light smile on her lips but it does not seem to be a laugh. There was some meat on that small cute nose and her mouth was rosy red. It was a somewhat adorable look, but when everyone looked at her, no one seemed to think that this was a young little lady. Some people were naturally beautiful but had no temperament, whereas others might not be beautiful or have a good temperament but was moving. This young lady's appearance was delicate and cute. One would not say that she was exceptionally pretty, but that air around her made one could not help but lose themselves in. That kind of majestic and dignified air came from the noble elegance found in the bottom of her heart. It made others not dare to do anything rash around her. And her walking posture, a slightly lifted chin as the beginning of her skirt did not move as her hand was overlapped in front of her was done correctly, neither stiff nor consciously, like she has done such actions for thousands of time and thus there was no loophole at all. This kind of noble temperament and the majestic air that came out from her heart made her not look like a 14 or 15 years old young little lady but a noble and high-ranking married woman that had gone through the vicissitudes of life. Shen Yu, Shen Qing, Ren Wanyan and Chen Ruchu in front unknowing became this young lady's background, like the four maids that she brought along. Moreover, by walking lastly, she was clearly their mistress. Who is that? Yi Peilan murmured. Even as a female who saw this young lady, could not help but lose oneself. How could someone at such a bearing? Is this Shen family's guest? Bai Wei asked. It seemed to be someone who has not seen the others before. At the male side of the banquet, there was absolute silence. The way male look at people were different from females. Everyone present were people in the official circles and naturally could see that distinct aspect that this young lady had. It was not the appearance but her bearing, like the calm of one who had experienced the great winds and high waves and in front of everything maintained a noble attitude but made others feel her disdain from the inside out. It was like a leopard who ran into a flock of sheep. There was a completely inharmonious feeling. Is this the daughter of General Shen? The person who was talking to Kai Lin now spoke with some excitement. This is indeed a good appearance. Good sense of presence. The student has surpassed the master. Shen Miao. Kai Lin was stunned for a moment and took a closer look before crying out, it's Shen Miao. A stone caused 1,000 ripples and soon everyone sitting quiet and down before an instant uproar followed. Shen Miao. Feng and Ning could not help but be startled. Shen Miao and her sat at the same table on normal days in Guangwentang and naturally saw it clearly than others. That was indeed Shen Miao. There was no mistake. These days Shen Miao's temperament has calmed down quite a lot. Even though she used to be very quiet, but she no longer followed behind Shen Yu and Shen Qing and say something ignorantly or stupidly. Thus her quiet appearance was actually not bad. Feng and Ning thought that Shen Miao only became smarter but did not think that if she were to dress up formally, she would be shock everyone. Because of the recuperation after falling into the water, she had slimmed down a lot. Normally one would not notice, but from today, her chin was sharper a little, making her previous appearance of 11 or 12 years old look like a young budding beauty at 14 of age. It was as if the baby that was curled up in the nest of beasts had finally woke up and the claws were brandished for the first time. Pei Shuikai was also at the male side of the banquet. Even though he was just a teacher in Guangwentang, everyone respected talented people and he had some status in the official circles. To be this talented at a young age, if he were to enter the official circles, he would definitely be able to hold a position. Everyone in the official circles were smart and know that in order to pave for their future, even though Pei Lang had yet to go to that direction. Shen Miao's gaze swept over to the male side of the banquet and landed on Pei Lang for a moment. She knew that in today's academy examinations, even though Pei Lang was an accounting teacher, during the contending of talents, it was then when students was able to challenge the teachers. Pei Lang's literary talent on the circulation of law was well founded, which impressed Fu Shuyi. Afterwards, in order to win over this talent to his side, Fu Shuyi made a lot of actions before finally gaining the powerful force of Pei Lang. In this lifetime, this matter absolutely must not happen. Pei Lang was sensitive and felt that young ladies, who was sitting far away, was on himself and observing like a hunter watching its valuable prey. That made him felt a strange feeling in his heart. He looked over, but Shen Miao had long turned her head over. The Darrens around were full of praise. The daughter of General Shen has such an air at such a young age. One must not underestimate her future. Her appearance is also good. A blue-clad youth said, originally did not realize that this Shen Miao was considered a beauty. When youths look at young ladies, they only see their appearance. Unfortunately, she is a stupid, foolish thing. After Kai Lin recovered from his short astonishment, he was dissatisfied that everyone was looking at Shen Miao and ignored Shen Yu, so he coldly scoffed. You are then a stupid, foolish thing. An unexpected voice exploded in his ear. Kai Lin jumped in front and saw a red satin-clad red dumpling staring at him. He was short, but his imposing manner was great. Apologies. A green-clad youth rushed over to Kai Lin and smiled. My younger brother was rude and have offended. Kai Lin wanted to scold someone, but when he saw that the other person was the heir of Ping Nanbo, Su Mingfeng, he swallowed the words that was at the edge of his tongue. Su Mingfeng was Xie Jingxing's close friend, who would dare to mess with him? Eldest brother, Su Minglang tugged the edge of Su Mingfeng's clothes. That older sister is very pretty. You should marry her as your wife. Su Mingfeng's lips stiffened. Fortunately, Su Minglang's voice was very soft and no one heard it. He leaned over slightly and asked, does second younger brother know young lady Shen? I do not know. Su Minglang played with his fingers innocently. After that, Su Mingfeng did not speak anymore. Shen Miao walked behind Ren Wanyan's entourage into the female area of the banquet. Generally at the female side of the banquet the ferns and ladies would sit randomly with their familiar and close friends, and this was the same with the young ladies. But Shen Miao, other than going to Guang Wentang, she would be at home, not including Shen Yu and Shen Qing. No one in Guang Wentang was willing to be friends with her. She was also not angry nor worried and just find a seat to sit down. She was not afraid of these young ladies isolating her, but on the contrary, enjoying this calm and quiet feeling. Those young ladies saw that Shen Miao was dressed differently today and became somewhat jealous. They wanted to see her making a fool of herself and purposely isolated her, but they saw Shen Miao sitting down by herself and did not appear to be miserable. There were chessboards and leaf cards that were on the table so that the young ladies would not feel bored. She thought for a little before picking the chess pieces from the chess basket and started to play against herself. She makes no sense of any of the four scholarly arts. Previously, because of the second and third household deliberate actions to increase her hate for them, after she got married to Fu Shuyi, she had no time to learn. Thus when she returned from Qin country and faced the exquisite Mei Furen, who could sing and dance, she felt inferior in her heart. Those concubines in the palace compared her and Mei Furen and said that she was a vulgar and ignorant because she came from a military lineage. That was why Fu Shuyi would not even see this kind of empress like her. However, it was not necessary for one to be a talent in chess to play chess. Even though she did not know how to play chess, but because of those years when she went to Qin country for Fu Shuyi, she studies meticulously on a number of the art of war. She did not know how to play chess but knew how to use troops. This was a chess of war. The noble females looked from afar and saw Shen Miao's calm and composed self. This kind of indifference and attitude of her in a higher status divided her apart from the rest, as if she was high up and the rest of them were of lower status. Fifth young lady has changed a lot today. Yi Furen smiled at Ren Wanyan and said, she seemed to have become an adult. It was not good for her to say that Shen Miao had clearly suppressed Shen Yu and Shen Qing and can only remind Ren Wanyan in a roundabout way. How could Ren Wanyan not know? She was good at observing others' words and gestures, and throughout the walk over, everyone's eyes were not at her nor Shen Yu or Shen Qing but was obviously on Shen Miao, who was walking at the back. She was fuming with rage in her heart. It seemed that Shen Miao was really putting a lot of effort this time. She knew that Prince Ding would be present at the academy examinations and trying all ways to attract Prince Ding's attention and compete with her Qing Er. She picked up the teacup and looked over at the male side of the banquet as she laughed. Is it not? Now that her age is no longer young, old Tai doted on little five, saying that since eldest brother-in-law is not present, she said to me just before we leave that I have to take a good look if there is anyone suitable. Chen Ruchu's, who was sitting by the side, vision suddenly moved. Take a good look. Shen Yu and Shen Qing were older in age as compared with Shen Miao, but they have to look for Shen Miao first. Naturally, it was not because of the kindness of old Shen Furen. Old Shen Furen hated the entire family of the first household, so how would Shen Miao have anything good out of it? Chen Ruchu's gaze landed on Shen Qing, who was talking to Yi Pei Lan. Ren Wanyan seemed to be urgently settling Shen Miao's marriage before Shen Qin's return. Why? Was it because Shen Qing was also in love with Prince Ding? And want to remove the biggest threat for Shen Qing? Just as she was thinking, she heard a racket forming at the male side of the banquet. Zhang Furen mentioned, Prince Yu of first rank has arrived. Shen Miao, who was contemplating the next move, paused and the white piece immediately fell onto the board. She raised her eyes and looked towards the male side of the banquet with eyes full of calm. Prince Yu of first rank. In the past lifetime, old Shen Furen wanted to marry her off to that crippled and sexual lowlife who was currently 42 years old. If she wasn't obsessed with Fu Shuyi and push her way to be his dependent, most likely she would become a pile of bones in the residence of Prince Yu. One was able to see a middle-aged male walking over. He did not seat with those officials and youths and sat at the far away at the special seats for distinguished guests. This man was around 40 years old, looking dark and hideous, wearing pine rosin color robes. His clothes were luxurious but unfortunate, he only had a leg. This was the blood brother of the emperor, Prince Yu of the first rank. Prince Yu was brother of the emperor with the same mother. When he was young, he saved the emperor's life from the hands of the assassins and thus his left leg was injured and had to be amputated, becoming a cripple. Since that incident onward, Prince Yu's temperament changed and he became brutal, vicious and had a perverse personality. He had a house full of concubines. The imperial family knew it all even though no one outside knew of anything. This Prince Yu had a filthy hobby of playing with countless of women till they die. Yu Wangfei had passed away 7 years ago, which it itself was strong. But since the emperor and the empress dowager protected Prince Yu, Yu Wangfei's family can only swallow their grievances. Recently there was a sudden news from Prince Yu residence that Prince Yu had the intention to bring a Wangfei in. For a period of time, everyone in the Ding capital was endlessly speculating. Prince Yu's status was very high and he also had the favor of the emperor and empress dowager, thus his Wangfei had to be of equal status. The noble and high-ranking families that really love their daughters would naturally not let their daughters enter the wolf's den. Those who see their daughters as a bargaining chip would then be anxious to exchange their daughters for prestige and wealth, even at the expense of their life. Looking the previous Yu Wangfei's family, although they had lost a daughter, the emperor took care of them and didn't they became a lot more prosperous. Shen Miao's gaze passed Prince Yu and landed on Ren Wanyan at the banquet area designated for females. Sure enough, she saw Ren Wanyan's face brighten and said to Yi Furen, His Majesty indeed treat Prince Yu really well. They were all people who fight in the courtyard, so Yi Furen immediately thought of what Ren Wanyan's intention. Even though she found that Ren Wanyan's action was despicable, but her master and Shen Gui was in the same faction, so naturally she had to side and help Ren Wanyan. She smiled and said, That's true. Even though he is much older but is someone that will dote others. Chen Ruchu lowered her head at the side and slowly ate some snacks, but the smile on her lips was somewhat odd. Dote others. Believe that no one will be willing to see their own daughter marry a crippled widower even if he was to dote on them or had huge amount of power. It was as good as pushing one's daughter into the fire pits. As she thought about it, she turned her head and looked at Shen Miao. Shen Miao was held the chess pieces patiently and placed them on the chessboards as if she did not pay any attention to anyone. Suddenly Chen Ruchu felt bottomless in her heart. After Shen Miao woke up after falling into the water, she was like another person, like Shen Shen's blood was awakened in her. The entire Shen Shen family had fierce and violent personality, and if Shen Miao know about Ren Wanyan's plan, would she obediently accept it? Just as she was thinking, she saw Shen Miao seemingly came to be aware of her gaze, thus she raised her head to look at her. That pair of eyes was filled with cold that it iced Chen Ruchu's heart even though it was only the 10th lunar month. Shen Miao lowered her head and looked at the chess in her hands. In the last life, she made a fool of herself during the chrysanthemum banquet, but Ren Wanyan mentioned about Prince Yu's marriage to old Shen Taitai upon the return to the residence. Ren Wanyan said, not saying that little Five's actions today had no good aspects at all, and moreover she had lose Shen family's reputation. Which noble family would be willing to marry a young lady like little Five? Now that there is a good marriage of Prince Yu, if little Five marry over, she would be a Wangfei and have the favor from His Majesty and Empress Dowager and can be considered as fortunate. Even though his legs are not good and his age is somewhat more matured, but our little Five do not have any exceptional abilities and thus it would not be a loss for little Five. They made it high sounding, but it was in fact very vicious. It was later on when she spent a lot of money to bribe a wrong Jing Tang's maid could she then know these remarks. Old Shen Furen hated the first household in her heart because Shen Shen was born from the Yuanpei. When old Master Shen was alive, he deeply favored Shen Shen, which made old Shen Furen, the second wife, jealous. It was so difficult for her to endure till the death of old Master Shen, but Shen Shen's military power was untouchable. Since Shen Shen was untouchable, Shen Miao was targeted, and as to target a female, there was nothing more painful than letting her marry into hardship. Old Shen Furen and Ren Wanyan hit it off and immediately sent someone over to Prince Yu residence to bring the matter up. Shen Miao was afraid and angry. At that time she was in love with Fu Shuyi, and in a haste, that very night she packed up and went over to Prince Ding residence and begged him to shelter her. She did not care about her reputation when others deliberately spread the matter out, as she thought that since her reputation was already destroyed, it would be too late to change anything and thus better to marry to Prince Ding as a concubine than to Prince Yu residence. At that time old Shen Furen was furious at the turn of events. Even though Fu Shuyi was angry in his heart, he did not treat her badly on the surface. Perhaps he saw the value of Shen family army. Even though he did not treat Shen Miao warmly, he did not refute her. Upon Shen Shen return at the end of the year, what welcomed him was the news of his daughter in the capital jumping into the residence of others. He was shocked and angry, but Shen Miao did not hesitate to protest with a hunger strike, so Shen Shen ran out of ideas and could only use all his military accomplishments to finally exchange a title of Ding Wangfei for her. But no one had thought that that was the beginning of a real nightmare. Shen Miao closed her eyes. The mistakes that was made in her previous life had all traced back to today, and today was destined to be a turning point of her life. Those people who owed her must now start to pay their debts. Hey, why play by yourself? Suddenly a voice rang by her ear. It was unknown when Feng and Ning walked over, and even though there was some awkward expression, she sat across her. Why not play a game with me? Do you know how to play chess? Feng and Ning looked down at the chessboard. She only intended to casually talk, but when she looked down, some interest of hers were sparked. After carefully looking for a while, she was unable to see anything out of it and asked, what kind of tactic is this? I have not seen it before. This is not a game of chess. Shen Miao smiled. This is fighting a war. What? Now it cannot be seen. Shen Miao said plainly, only when the pieces are swallowed then it can be seen for this kind of chess. Just like a next that is woven firmly and tightly so that no one can escape. Feng and Ning shuddered. What are you talking? It is strange and horrifying. She looked over at the male side of the banquet and suddenly her eyes brightened and gave Shen Miao a look of encouragement. Look there. His Highness Prince Ding has arrived. At the banquet section for men, Prince Ding, Fu Shuyi, was wearing a loose gold and blue robe with green jaded books and looked splendid. He was born handsome, and coupled with his solemn bearing but yet cordial actions, he did not have the temperament of an overbearing prince. Throughout his way, he was able to attract the cries of surprise from the female side of the banquet. Shen Miao lowered her head as her fingers dug deep into her palm as she clenched her fists. 10 years of accompaniment and wholehearted support was only exchanged with a piece of long white silk and extermination of an entire clan. And even her son and daughter lost their lives. The kinder this person looked on the outside, the more vicious his heart was. How just he looked on the outside was how cruel he was on the inside. In the last life, this man grant her with an intact corpse. In this lifetime, she want this person die without an intact corpse. Fu Shuyi, Bengong has returned. At the male side of the banquet, other than Prince Ding, there was only two princes who attended, Prince Zhou, Fu Shuan, and Prince Jing, Fu Shuzan. The crown prince's health was not good and would not participate in such an event. Consort Xu Xian gave birth to Prince Zhou and Prince Jing, and both of their abilities were outstanding. Prince Zhou was much more arrogant, whereas Prince Jing was introverted. Both of them was eyeing the throne as everyone knew that the crown prince's health was poor and there would eventually be a day when the emperor would change the crown prince, and Consort Xu Xian had the favor of the emperor. By contrast, Prince Ding mother, Consort Dongshu had a much lower profile. If Prince Ding was not somewhat outstanding, she would not be able to sit in the position of the four consorts. In the previous life, Prince Zhou and Prince Jing was entangled in the fight for the throne but relaxed their vigilance on Prince Ding. The first reason being Fu Shuyi was in good relations with the crown prince and would always walk the same path as the crown prince and personally find previous medicinal herbs for the crown prince that even the empress was quite satisfied with Fu Shuyi. This made the rest of the people think that Prince Ding was a lackey of the crown prince. The second reason was that Fu Shuyi was usually aloof from politics and material pursuits and would disdain from participating in the affairs of the court. In addition, Consort Dongshu had a cautious nature and would spend all day recite Buddhist scriptures. Without a strong maternal support, it was expected that Prince Ding was unable to make any waves. But in fact the final one who would sit on the dragon seat was Fu Shuyi, that they think was unable to make any waves. Shen Miao picked up the leaf cards. Just like these leaf cards, the cards in Fu Shuyi's hand was rotten since birth and everyone thought that he would be eliminated at the beginning, but not one dreamed that he had never thought of using the cards at his hands. His cards are all in other people's hands and what he needed to do was to snatch them. Why do you have no reactions? See her remaining silent and not even see a trace of admiration to Fu Shuyi in her eyes. Feng and Ning felt somewhat strange. Don't you like him? Shen Miao raised her head and looked at her. Feng and Ning was shocked. That one look made her heart freeze and she felt a sudden urge to kneel down. She did not know where did the feeling came from, but she knew that Shen Miao was not happy with what she just said. She paused and spoke. Actually, I also do not like him. How can a person be so perfect in the world? It is just unreal. This time Shen Miao took a serious look at Feng and Ning. She did not expect that this proud young lady would see it that way. There were a number of people who were in love with Fu Shuyi, and if Fu Shuyi was willing, the entire field of young ladies would fall for him. How would there be someone who was able to be that unconventional? She slowly said, it seems that you have someone in your heart. What nonsense you are talking about? Feng and Ning's little face suddenly reddened. Don't falsely accuse a good person. Shen Miao did not continue to speak to her. She did not inclination to listen to a little girl's troubles. Naturally she had her own things. After much coming and going as there many invitations sent out for the chrysanthemum banquet, almost everyone had arrived. Below the Yanbei Tang chrysanthemum field, a tall huge stage was built. The stage was decorated plainly, but no one felt that it was vulgar as the late emperor used it to pray to the heavens. It was a stage that had the air of dragons. Both sides of it was inscribed with personals, and some of them were wearing soldiers' uniforms with red headbands, beating the drums loudly. The sound of the drums rumbled straight throughout the skies as the musician plucked their chin. Its song of a virtuous gentleman, which meant to portray the imperial family request and yearn to pick the true talents for the country in today's academy for the empire of Mingqi. The music entered everyone's ears, and due to the unique magnificent sound, one would not be able to help but feel the surge in emotion. Most of those present were youth, and they were in a moment where they were hot-blooded, thus the music made them enter it, and they could not help but show off all their talents to everyone and fight for a good future for Mingqi's imperial family to leave being a stroke in history. Even a female could not help but reveal a look of excitement. Although they were unable to become a court official like males, their fathers and brothers were pillars of the country. Their own family clan had indomitable spirit, and with the glory and honor, they would be bathed in the imperial family's favor and feel their heart full of gratitude. The entire audience were enveloped in the vast and might of the imperial benevolence and was moved, but there was one person who had a look of indifference and not a single trace of being moved. Shen Miao's eyes landed on the person who was in the center playing the chin. This is the favorite thing the Mingqi imperial family loved to do. To incite the hearts of the youth to dedicate themselves to the service of the country and use them to do rotten stuff for the imperial family, but at the end, once the country was stabilized, these hot-blooded youths that shed blood and sweat would rarely get a good ending. Boil the hound once the rabbit was caught. When every emperor takes over the throne, they would eradicate the older generation of people. Especially those officials who had experienced the dark nature of the fight for the throne. After gaining knowledge of the filthy arrangements and bloody events, how could the imperial family be assured for them to rise up in their career? These exciting music would only be known as the funeral music in the future as it pushes people to their death. And now immersed in the hearts of the youths who serve the country, would die under the treacherous strives of the imperial family and become innocent sacrifices. She could not save everyone in the world but could save her own people. Shen Miao raised a hand lightly and her right sleeve brushed past the edge of the table. That bright teacup was brushed to the ground with a paw sound. The crisp sound resonated in the venue and it should not be heard, but under the rich rhythm of the music, it sounded just at the right time where the thread was in the midst of being pulled up and that messed up the other strings too. With a paw, the rhythm of the music was wrecked. Just like waking from a dream, Feng and Ning suddenly recovered and saw Shen Miao picking up the teacup from the floor as she smiled, pardon me. A slip of my hand. Those musicians who were up on stage playing with intensely, had their mind almost blown and was in so much pain that they almost fainted. Mingqi had learned this music from the hands of a Western foreigner and had some intention of confusing others. It could instigate the small emotions in one's heart. This piece was a war song and could amplify the feelings of faith and allegiance greatly, thus if this piece was played fully, those who had a loyal heart would become foolishly devoted. It was only when Shen Miao became the empress that she became aware of the hideous nature of the music. The imperial family of Mingqi used this music to confuse the younger generations and make these younger generations believe for them. When the Xiongnu attacked, the imperial family had the Lin Yu army defend the capital and recruited new army to the frontier. They made these musicians go up on stage to play the music and most of the youths left for the army without looking back and some of them did not even reach the marriageable age. After such an interruption from Shen Miao, those musicians were unable to focus their energy on their hands and at the final chin part, it had lost the passion that it previously had and was just played like an ordinary song. The hot-blooded sentiment that was stirred gradually dissipated and everything returned to calmness. But at the end Shen Miao's move had attracted some people's attention. Over at the dedicated male area, Fu Shuyi and Pei Lang looked over at the same time. Fu Shuyi belonged to the imperial family and naturally would not be ignorant to the methods that the imperial family used. The clear sound of the teacup might seem like an accident, but it had disrupted the musician's rhythm and could no longer stir up everyone's feelings. He naturally wanted to know who was the initiator. Fu Shuyi has a cautious and suspicious temperament, thus he did not think that the other did it unintentionally. The purple-clad female was talking to others with her chin resting on her hand. She looked indifferent and afar, but there was an indescribable air about her that clearly set her apart from others. Who was ninth younger brother looking at? Prince Zhou. Fu Shu and followed Fu Shuyi's side and revealed an evident smile. Talking about among his brothers, it is only ninth younger brother who have yet to take a wife. Imperial father had mentioned many times of the selection of a wife for ninth younger brother. So, which family's young lady do that female below to? She looks pretty good. Not sure which are her relatives and if we know any one of them. It is the fifth young lady of the formidable great general residence and this one student. Pei Lang stood not far away and replied after hearing what was said. The fifth young lady of the formidable great general residence. Prince Jing, Fu Shu's on. Memory was good, but perhaps Shen Miao's reputation was so huge that the imperial family were no strangers to her name. He said, isn't that the daughter of General Shen Xin? Seemed to be called Shen Miao. How could it be Shen Miao? Fu Shu and smiled without a care. The matter of Shen Miao chasing our ninth younger brother was something the entire capital knows about, and a few days back didn't she fell into the water just to look at ninth younger brother. If ninth younger brother was truly pleased with Shen Miao, it would not be so troublesome. Moreover, Shen Miao is an idiot, but you see the young lady at the other side has an elegant and noble air. How could she be Shen Miao? Fourth older brother should speak cautiously as Shu Yi did not have such intentions. Fu Shu Yi shook his head, but his sight was firmly on the purple-clad young lady far at the other side of the female section of the banquet. In his heart, it was not that he was not shocked. Shen Miao in his eyes was of no difference to the other young ladies that admire him. Those young ladies that like him would pretend to be modest on the surface and understood the etiquette and advance or retreat appropriately, but Shen Miao, most likely other that looking at him foolishly, she did not know anything else. He obviously would not take into consideration of an idiot that the entire Ding capital laugh about. If it was not due to Shen Xin, he would have clearly showed the disgust on his face. Moreover, his memories of Shen Miao was someone who always loved to wear bright red or green robes and loved to put on gold jewelry as she ferociously wear thick rouge on her face, like those clown characters on a countryside stage. But the purple-clad young lady had a clear and fair complexion and graceful brows, and that air of nobility sets her apart from the surround female. How could that be Shen Miao? He was not the only one who was perplexed. So was Pei Lang. As Shen Miao's teacher of 2 years, Pei Lang undoubtedly understood Shen Miao more than Fu Shuyi. It is supposedly said that one can change the appearance and clothes can be switched, but the personality traits were different. Pei Lang was a scholar and scholars value personality traits more than others. Shen Miao practically became another person overnight. How would there be such a thing? He did not think about the matter of the teacup, although he felt that there was something wrong about the music pieces in his mind. How would a young lady would be able to hear the problem out of it? Not to mention Shen Miao was never an expert in Qin. Everyone were in their own thoughts when the musician ended their performance. The academy examinations were about to start. This year's academy examination was different from the previous. It did not differentiate between male and female but separates scholarly and military arts. Even though Guang Wentang require its students to be proficient in both scholarly and military arts, and both arts were in the curriculum, but with the 100 years of regulations, very little females would choose military arts, and in the scholarly arts, most males would commonly discuss about economics and taxation. This was because this was the way the court select their talents. Just like one of the Darren had said, it is common knowledge that successful talented candidates would often become generals and officials. The topics for military arts would include horse riding and shooting of arrows, but that was not really considered a success, as performing military exercises as well as other specifics were not required. Whereas for females, most of the topics on scholarly arts would be traditionally in the 4 categories of literary and poetry. It was much more demanding for females not only in Mingqi, but all the other countries. Females' place was at home to support one's husband and educate one's children and to sing of the wind and moon. Mingqi's examinations were all divided into 3 parts, for 1 to draw out, 1 to select and 1 to challenge. Everyone need to draw out, but the school wrecked the order and made everyone who participate to draw out the topic of the academy examinations. In order to avoid getting 2 or extremely difficult ones, females would select in the 4 scholarly arts, whereas the males will draw out from either the military and scholarly areas. As this was something that cannot be avoided, Shen Miao would be humiliated in this regard as she did not know any of the 4 scholarly arts. As for the second part of selecting, one can select an area which one was good at to exhibit. Like Shen Yu would often choose to play the Qin, and Shen Qing would choose calculation. As for the final part, which was to challenge, this was not about challenging a topic but challenging others. One would be able to go up on stage to challenge one of the students as an opponent on a particular area. Such scenes were often done when both talents are evenly matched. As for Shen Miao, those who challenge her would only insult their own strength. There were also others who want to watch Shen Miao make a fool of herself and would purposely challenge Shen Miao up the stage and attack her in another way. The outcome was one that did not require much guesswork. No matter which topic, Shen Miao would suffer a crushing defeat. That was why to Shen Miao the yearly academy examinations were like a nightmare, as she would be treated as a joke by everyone. These kind of days were countless. And it was likewise the same this year. Like in previous years, the main examiners went up onto the stage and said a bunch of stuff while the other 2 came out from the back with 2 small wooden barrels filled with paper. These paper all had the topic of the academy examinations, and it was the students who would draw it out themselves. Both male and female would need to draw. One person walked over to the male side of the banquet, and one by one the male students started to draw. The other tall female carried the wooden barrel over to the female side of the banquet, and the female students started drawing orderly. Feng and Ning blinked her eyes. May the gods give their blessing. I only hope to draw Qin or poetry topics. I really do not know anything about painting and chess. She looked towards Shen Miao. You really seem not worried at all. Do you have a card up in your sleeve? Or just go with the flow of things? She did not mean to be too harsh, but Shen Miao was a fool who did not have much knowledge on anything. Shen Miao declined to comment. What was the purpose of drawing? Qin, chess, poetry and painting were things that she could not do. When the wooden barrel reached to Shen Miao's table, Feng and Ning drew first and could not wait to open up the paper she drew up. She was relieved. It's Qin. It's Qin. This is good. The Qin practices these days were not wasted. Shen Miao, what is yours? Shen Miao's hand was just taken out from the barrel, and there was a white piece of paper in her palm that was folded to a long piece. She opened it out and there was just a word on it. Painting. Painting. Feng and Ning stretched her neck, and when she saw the paper in Shen Miao's hand, she was also slightly stunned for a moment before saying, do you know how? This was actually sincere words, as Shen Miao did not have any knowledge on the 4 scholarly arts. There should be an implicit charm in painting, which was needless to say if one cannot even paint. Seeing Shen Miao keeping her silence, Feng and Ning also quietened down. It was most likely humans were strange. In the beginning she found Shen Miao unpleasing to her eyes, but now when Shen Miao behaved indifferently to her, Feng and Ning on the other hand felt more willing to talk to Shen Miao. She felt that the current Shen Miao had a special temperament and could unconsciously attract others. As both of them were being silent, Shen Yu and Shen Qing walked over confidently before Shen Yao smiled. What did the lot that 5th younger sister says? Let me take a look. Maybe eldest sister and me could come out with some ideas. Shen Qing nodded her head. Yes. Me and 2nd younger sister have drawn poetry and painting respectively. What is yours? Shen Miao kept quiet, so Shen Yu smiled as she went forward to take the paper from her hands and said as though she had no bad intentions, 5th younger sister must not be afraid, since there is still us, 2 sisters here. We would always look after you. Feng and Ning snorted. Even though she previous also did not like Shen Miao, but she did not find Shen Yu and Shen Qing pleasing to her eyes. Her mother was a formidable person, and there were numerous younger sisters at home who had harbored any bad intentions or was calculative. She could all see it with one glance. What were the difference between Shen Yu and Shen Qing and the Shu sisters in her residence who want to contend for favor? They wanted nothing more than to use Shen Miao's stupidity to elevate themselves only. Sure enough, when Shen Yu spoke those words, on the other side when Yi Pei Lan heard it, she started to laugh. Shen Yu, why are you saying these things to her? Even if you came out with the best ideas, I fear that she would not be able to cope with it. Exactly. It is better to let Shen Miao herself prepare. Zhang Xiaozan also laughed. Even though the surrounding Tete and young ladies had heard such blatant sarcasms, they pretended not to hear. On the surface they looked serious, but the corners of their lips hooked up. There was no other reasons other than Shen Miao making a fool of herself in the yearly academy examinations. Since ridiculing had become a habit, there was no difference at all, even though such ridiculing behavior should not appear in a noble young lady. Don't say that about 5th younger sister. Shen Yu said disapprovingly. 5th younger sister is very hardworking. She opened up the paper and made an "Aya" sound before looking at Shen Miao in a joyous cry. It's painting. 5th younger sister, you have chosen the same task as me. Feng and Ning looked at Shen Yu apprehensively. It was just the same task. What was there to be joyous about? Shen Miao, however, was well aware. It was most likely that Shen Yu felt that with the comparison of her own stupidity, she would be able to make herself more outstanding, and moreover Fu Shuyi was present today. Thinking of Fu Shuyi, her eyes darkened. What does 5th younger sister plan to paint? Shen Qing asked curiously. Why not let 2nd younger sister give 1 or 2 pointers? The words were filled with good intentions, like an older sister protecting her younger sister. If one were to see such a vivid scene, they would only say that Shen Qing treated her younger cousins with utmost care. Have trouble both of you to worry. Shen Miao said coldly. However, this is the academy examinations and it would be better to follow the rules and regulations. Isn't it considered cheating if 2nd elder sister were to help me? The 2 people who are involved in cheating would have to be eliminated from the academy examinations. 2nd elder sister would end up in such a position for me. When her lukewarm words were spoken, Shen Yu's face changed. Yes, such acts would be considered as cheating, but previously everyone would only say that she was warm and kind and thus nothing more would come to mind. Now after Shen Miao pointing it out specially, everyone's vision towards Shen Yu had changed. In the academy examinations, an additional person meant an additional opponent and everyone wants to be the only one receiving the entire audience praise. Shen Yu had good relations with everyone in Guangwentang, but that did not mean that there was no one jealous of her. At present, these young ladies were all her opponents, and as Shen Yu would always win the first position during the academy examinations at the female side, there would definitely be grievances. If they have anything to use against her to get her eliminated from the academy examinations, wouldn't there be one less competitor? All of a sudden those female students who were standing together with Shen Yu looked over with covetously like a tiger watching its prey, and that includes Shen Yu's best friend Yi Pei Lan. Shen Yu shivered. She naturally knew the seriousness of it. Turning around, she however saw Shen Miao look at her with a smile, but not really a smile, and with eyes full of ridicule. If she were to cower like that, it would only make the good intentions she just showed to appear false, but if she were to seize the opportunity, there was no guarantee that these students would not take the opportunity to ensure she was unable to participate in the examinations. Either ways were also wrong. Shen Yu strongly tempered the resentment in her heart and glared at Shen Miao before smiling reluctantly. Since fifth younger sister had said so, then I would not take initiative to say more. Let the matter drop then. Feng and Ning could not help but laugh before she deliberately spoke loudly, and here I thought how much love can she have for her younger sister. It was nothing more than that. Just a scare like that is considered as helping sincerely. In a short time, those young ladies' vision of Shen Yu became profound and thought-provoking. When Chen Rushu heard the sound of activities at this side, she was somewhat nervous. Shen Yu was after all still young and would not know how to cope with the situation on hand. At the same time her heart was somewhat chilled. Shen Miao could use a few sentences and words to provoke others' emotions and made the rest go along with her words. What a formidable mouth. But she cannot intervene in it as these were the kids' issues, and if she as a mother intervened, then it would be detrimental. Ren Wanyan and Shen Qing were somewhat rejoicing in her misfortune as they knew that if Shen Yu was too outstanding, it would only eclipse Shen Qing's glory. If Shen Yu did not do well, Shen family only had Shen Qing to prop them up. Shen Yu looked at Shen Miao. She thought, if this younger sister becomes smarter now, she would now speak to rescue her from the situation. After all, they were all sisters in the Shen residence, and what advantages would there be if it was spread that the few households in the Shen residence were not in harmony? Moreover, Shen Miao had always been curry favoring Shen Yu, and if she offends Shen Yu, Shen Miao would not have any more friends. But she waited for a long while and did not hear Shen Miao's answer. Shen Yu could not help but say, fifth younger sister. Second elder sister do not need to think about what to draw next. Shen Miao's voice was flat as though there was no waves. As for my side, it is not needed. Seeing that Shen Miao had no intention to give her a way out of this and looking around at the slightly ridicule look from the surrounding young ladies, for the first time Shen Yu could almost not control herself and wanted to slap Shen Miao. She reluctantly suppressed her emotions and said with her teeth clenched, it seems that fifth younger sister had already thought it out well. In that case, we will be able to see how fifth younger sister will be able to perform outstandingly. It must be fantastic. Shen Yu said the words outstandingly as she clenched her teeth. After finishing her words, she brushed her sleeves away and turned around to leave angrily. Shen Qing quickly followed along. Feng and Ning looked at Shen Miao and asked, although it felt very refreshing, why do you not give yourself a route to retreat? When the time comes for you to go up, she would definitely seize the opportunity to severely ridicule you. I don't like enduring. Shen Miao looked at the chess game in front. Don't endure. Don't look back. Don't be soft-hearted. Don't endure. Must kill. She picked up a chess piece and placed it on the chessboard. The examiners in charge of the academy examinations was already up on stage, and the personnel that were holding the wooden buckets had recorded the different categories to divide it to groups for the examinations. First up were the female groups, for the 4 scholarly arts. The students of Guangwentang did not have to take the academy examinations in the first grade, only when they are in grade 2 and 3. Grade 3 were done at the next wave, and thus only grade 2 students were left with around 20 over people. The female who attended Guangwentang were the capital's noble daughters, and Su daughters had no qualification. Even among the D daughters, families would also hire teachers into the residence to teach. Moreover, the fees for Guangwentang were not low. Every year their profits would reach to 1,000 liang. In the beginning Shen Xin did not care about such money matters, so the 3 daughters of the Shen residence were all sent to Guangwentang. Ren Wanyan had some dissatisfaction with the matter, but Shen Xin waved his hands on it and they did not dare to continue arguing. After all, the money in the public fund were all rewards that the emperor gave to Shen Xin for his battle efforts. 22 people were divided into 4 groups. There were more, 7 people, in the Qin group since females had always liked things that highlight themselves. For the other 3 topics, there were 5 people each. In the painting group where Shen Miao was in, there was Shen Yu, left commanding Imperial Censor's D daughter, Qin Qing from Fengtian residence, Fu Yin residence's Fan Luer, and Zhao Yan from the left vice minister residence. Fan Luer and Zhao Yan were both somewhat disappointed. Fan Luer expertise was in the Qin and Zhao Yan was good in chess. Moreover, no one was like Shen Yu who was proficient in every category. To be unable to pick their expertise in front of the males, Fan Luer and Zhao Yan was not satisfied about it. It was Qin Qing, who was as arrogant as usual. Qin Qing was pretty and was the only rival of Shen Yu in Guangwentang, but not on talent. Even though Shen Yu was a soft beauty, Qin Qing looked glamorous and her presence could push her down. Shen Miao's eyes landed on Qin Qing. Today she was wearing a green wide-sleeved cotton robes and there was a yellow belt on her waist. Her waist was less than a grip, and with the fluttering of her robes, there was some fairy-like feeling. As compared to the weak and soft appearance of Shen Yu, she was like a pure water lily. However, in such a life of a beautiful female would be caught up in the late emperor's plan of cleaning up of the noble family clans. After the left commanding Imperial Censor's family suffered a defeat, she was reduced to a prostitute in the army, and later it was heard that she used a knife and perished with some insignificant soldier in the army. Seeming aware of Shen Miao's sight, Qin Qing looked over and was somewhat surprised, but then turned back with some disgust, as if she was not willing to see one more look of Shen Miao. Shen Miao was not bothered about it, but it was Feng and Ning, who stood beside her, who tugged the corner of her clothes. Later on you should just draw anything casually and not think too much. Feng and Ning thought it simply. Since one would definitely be humiliated, to be humiliated like that would make those people find it boring. But if Shen Miao strived to be vindicated and did overstep the boundaries of propriety, then it would be a major disadvantage. Shen Miao nodded. After hearing the examiners on stage beating the drum, the academy examinations officially started. The first comparison was Qin. It could be Feng and Ning's good luck, as the female students who had picked Qin all had mediocre skills. In addition of being the best few in Qin, it turns out to be a lucky coincidence. Feng and Ning had picked up a big advantage. Moreover, Feng and Ning had been practicing her Qin skills hard these recent days, and it was finally not in vain. When she was sitting, there was some air of a gentlewoman, and coupled with her good looks and Qin sounds that comparing with those mediocre others, it was like a burst of breeze that made one feel pure and cool. A blue-clad youth at the male section of the banquet said, "It's sonorous and resounding." When Kai Lin heard it at the side, he kicked that youth unhappily. What was that? That was because one did not hear Yue Qin. If Yu was to play a piece, even 9 heavenly fairies would not be able to compare. Such ignorance. Kai Lin was one who always protected his crush, but Su Minglang, who heard it, began to twitch his mouth. He wanted to say something, but seeing his brother warning eyes, he held back. The Chin category was almost finished and the few examiners started to discuss with one another on the judgment. After the Chin group was done, it was then chess. The process for chess was much simpler. The 5 people were divided to 2 and play with one another, one game to define the winner, and marks were awarded for the chess strategy and manner. In this category, the winner was Yi Pei Lan. After chess it was literary. Shen Qing, Bai Wei and Zhang Xiao were all in a group. These 3 people were good friends normally, but in the academy examination, there was a nervous atmosphere. This time the literary context would be based on chrysanthemum. One would pick up the brush to write a poem down. First to see the calligraphy and second to see one's talent. Shen Qing's expertise was not at poetry and chess but accounting. Unfortunately accounting was in the male examination so she did not get it. But as long as the final result was not out, no one would know who would be the first position. One would need to wait till the end before it reaches to Shen Miao's group. Shen Yu glanced at Shen Miao. Most likely she still remembered that Shen Miao humiliated her just now. Shen Miao actually did not try to maintain their good sister's appearance. She smiled at Shen Miao. Later at the stage, 5th younger sister must not give way to older sister. To have such a confidence appearance, even I am a little afraid. These words were heard by Fan Luer at the right moment and she could not help but laugh. Shen Yu, what are you talking about? What confidence appearance could it be? Shen Miao has a trump card. Since you say it to such, I have some expectations already. Zhao Yan said and rejoiced at her misfortune. Remember last year Shen Miao picked chin but pulled the strings off from a good bamboo chin. It must be that she had inherited General Shen bravery. This year is painting, the brush better not be broken. As she spoke, she touched Shen Miao's cheek. Such a fair and tender face, better not paint on this face later on. Shen Miao did not move and just look at her indifferently. Under that extremely cold eyes, Zhao Yan's smile gradually froze and Fan Luer also felt that Shen Miao's expression was not good. There was a sudden wave of fear in her heart and she involuntarily pulled Zhao Yan's hand back. Qin Qing seemed somewhat impatient and glanced Shen Miao. Quarrel what quarrel? If you want to quarrel then go upstage and quarrel and let everyone see both of your appearances. After she said it like that, even though Zhao Yan and the rest were not happy about it, they did not speak anymore. At the male side of the banquet, Kai Lin looked at Shen Yu's figure excitedly, but that rice dumpling tug Su Mingfeng, that pretty older sister is there. Eldest brother look. Su Mingfeng was between laughter and tears. He did not know how his own younger brother was so persistent with Shen Miao. He was already grade 3 and this was the first time he was out after being seriously ill and also evidently weak, so he was unable to participate in the academy examinations. He also knew of Shen Miao's reputation. After all, the entire Ding capital knew that the formidable Shen general was unhindered in the battlefields but had an idiot for a daughter. She will definitely win, Su Minglang said while making a fist with his hands. Su Mingfeng did not express an opinion as he knew that it would be Shen Yu who would win the first place today again. In front of the stage, Shen Yu could not help but spoke to Shen Miao, 5th younger sister, later on you must not show any mercy. Older sister will wait for you. Definitely, Shen Miao answered. Would definitely not show any mercy. The chief examiner was the professor from the government cabinet, Zhang Ziqi. He was a little old man with a full head of gray hairs and was normally extremely serious. He opened the scroll in his hands and began to read the topics for today's exams. As for painting, this category was actually different every year. However, since this year the academy examinations and the chrysanthemum feast were held together, the topic was much simpler. Like literary in which the topic was chrysanthemum, the topic for painting was also chrysanthemum. There were 5 long tables on the stage and there were brushes and ink placed on them. After they orderly headed to their respective tables, the drummer beat the drums heavily indicating that the examination had started. Everyone stretched their necks out to look. These 5 people were considered the 5 who were the most unique of them all. Shen Yu was well known as a talent, Qin Qing was especially pretty and noble looking, Fan Luer and Zhao Yan were a pair of beautiful sisters and as for Shen Miao, she was naturally that stupid and ignorant idiot. The males were mostly looking to see both Shen Yu and Qin Qing while the females were looking mostly at Shen Miao. Bai Wei covered her mouth and said, today Shen Miao looks well behaved. There shouldn't be any weird action since it doesn't seem like it. Including this time, Shen Miao had experienced a total of 4 academy examinations. The first time she picked chess and she randomly placed a few chess pieces and it was a beaten army in total collapse. The second time she picked literary and flipped the ink stab and dirtied her robes. The third time she picked chin and a fine bamboo chin had its strings picked out. Rather than saying that everyone was here to see Shen Miao go up the stage, it would be better to say that everyone was watching how she would humiliate herself. But there were some differences today. The stage was spacious as the young lady sat in front of the table. Her brush movements were proper like she had received rigorous training and there seems not to be anything wrong to pick at. The 10th month was the golden month for autumn and the whistling sound of cold wind passed through the hall and lifted the breakaway strains of hair that were on her forehead while she slightly bowed. One was only able to see the beautiful curve of that little goose egg-shaped face as those eyelashes were hanging onto. Actually there was some beauty. That lotus purple cloak was making a vigorous fluttering sound as she sat properly, but she put her brush on the paper cheekly and her brush strokes flew smoothly as if she paid it no mind. However there was a kind of calm and confident air, just like the begonia in her hair, blooming brightly in a restrained manner. Yi Furan pursed her lips and said to Ren Wanyun with an unknown implication, the 5th lady had indeed grown up. Ren Wanyun smiled reluctantly but her hands were clenched tightly. Behind them the young ladies were conversing. For Shen Miao did not make a fool of herself till now, was it that her personality really changed? It is not possible, she should be putting up a show. Did you not see that she did not even think before her brush went down? Even Shen Yu have to think for a moment. For her to be like that, the biggest possibility is that she was just casually painting. Feng and Ning looked at Shen Miao who was on the stage and that strange feeling came back again. She suddenly had an intuition that today's chrysanthemum banquet would not be like it was in the past. For instance, like Shen Miao who was on the stage, would she really make a fool of herself? Or would she position herself so irresistibly that she would destroy all the misconceptions about her? At the male side of the seating, there were some that gradually found the difference. In this group, it was most likely the most pleasing group of all. Shen Yu's pink dress was elegant and softly pretty. Qin Qing was wearing a green dress with wide sleeves that made her look proud and beautiful. Fan Luer had a moving lovable charm, while Zhao Yan looked imaginative and unique. If one was to say who had gave no characteristic feeling, it would be the stupid, cowardly and tacky Shen Miao. At the first glance, among the 5 of them, Shen Miao did not only withstand the competition but was particularly prominent. She just sat quietly and clearly had her head down but there was a feeling of her looking at everyone with disdain, as if in that slim figure was someone who was in a high position that could determine the life and death of others and this couldn't but made them feel submissive. Pei Lang frowned. How could a person's temperament be like the sky and earth turning upside down? Is this person really Shen Miao? Fu Shuyi concealed his surprise into his heart. He did not notice that the Shen Miao now was earth-shaking different from the past one, but noticed Shen Miao's sitting posture. That straight back and gestures made him thought of one person. It was the mistress of the 6 palaces, her ladyship the Empress. Fu Shuyi knew that his thought was extremely ridiculous. The entire Ding capital knew that this girl loved him and he also hated to be loved by such a female. However, most of the times the news of Shen Miao were heard through rumors. From them it was known that Shen Miao had no skills, was snobbish, her actions were boorish and she was stupid and cowardly. From what was seen today, there was only a feeling in him that most probably those rumors were all not true. It is truly strange. The blue-clad youth who was reprimanded by Kai Lin spoke curiously. Isn't it said that grade 2's Shen Miao was an idiot? But it doesn't seem so. Kai Lin was also stunned. His sight was always following Shen Yu, but it seemed that there was some kind of pull from Shen Miao that could make others to involuntarily notice her. As if she was someone who was born standing at a position that everyone could see, especially today. He tried his best to suppress his strange thought and snorted, it's only an act. Eldest brother, she will win it. Su Minglang tugged the sleeve of the person beside. Su Mingfeng had some smile in his eyes but his expression was somewhat weird. Shen Miao. After a stick of incense, the drummer beat the drums again to indicate that the time limit was over. Shen Yu put her brush aside, she was very confident with her painting today. At the left side, it was Qin Qing and she also just completed her painting and was washing her brush. Even a simple action from her was as moving as a painting. But no matter how moving it was, in the academy examinations, it was not beauty that matters. She turned around to look at Shen Miao and thought in her heart that Shen Miao would be a total failure like every time, but she did not stir up any trouble today at all. It really seemed that she became smart after being provided with pointers from others. One could pretend, but talent cannot be pretended and she should be completing it in a flurry. However, from what she saw, Shen Miao had already put her brush aside and looked calmly at the person who was coming over to collect the painting. Shen Yu's smile stiffened. All right, do head down. After all the paintings were collected, it was the evaluation of the grade 2 females and that would require time. Fifth younger sister, what exactly did you draw? After Shen Yu got down the stage, she could not wait to question Shen Miao. She did not know why but Shen Miao made her feel disturbed. You will know it later on. Shen Miao lightly smiled and that smile seemed to have a more meaning than what it appears. She turned around and walked to a place where others were unable to see before speaking to Gu Yu, who was beside her. Think of a way to send this to historian advisor Jing Residence's second young master's hands. He is the one sitting at the opposite side of the banquet, 3 seats on the left from that bluish-green clad person. Gu Yu hesitated and seemed to be somewhat confused before saying, this servant will leave. Go then. Shen Miao patted her shoulders and walked back to her original seat and looked at Pei Lang from far away. Upon feeling a pair of eyes on him, Pei Lang raised his head. Even though it was separated by the distance, he could still see that the gaze contained close observation of himself. My apologies, Pei Lang, Shen Miao said in her heart. In this case I will borrow your hand to shake the unbreakable foundation of Ming-Chi's imperial family. After all, you owe it to me. The examiners were up on stage discussing the results of the examinations and the students below the stage were also in the heat of discussion. Today Shen Miao did not make a fool of herself and that made the academy examinations seem a little boring, but many of her classmates who did not look at her now paid her more attention. Humans were all weird. When a normally terrible person performed a little better, perhaps others would think that there would be a reversal of fortune. Feng and Ning was somewhat nervous and kept looking over at the examiners from time to time. For some unknown reasons, the few Darrens on stage had a dispute over something. It seems that it is also very intense today. Fu Shuan laughed, but for females, why should one be so competitive since they would not enter the official circles? He has some conceited characteristics and was not afraid that the Darrens beside him would be unhappy upon hearing his words. After all, some of their daughters were those who were up on the stage. The opportunity of an academy examination is rare and naturally one would take advantage of it. Fu Shuyi said. Ninth younger brother's words are not wrong. Fu Shuzan picked up the tea on the table for a sip before speaking. If there is any particularly outstanding female, ninth younger brother must pay a little more attention. Although he looked quiet, he was not one who was easy to deal with. He was secretly and openly testing if Fu Shuyi would find a wife with a strong family background. Fifth older brother is joking. Fu Shuyi shook his head. Imperial father will call the shots for my marriage. I would not have a say in the matter. That was also true. It was the emperor that arranged Fu Shuyi's current tasks and he rarely took the initiative to think of anything up by himself. In the eyes of an outsider, this kind of prince was simply overly docile and had no ambition, just like consort Dongshu. But in the eyes of Prince Jing, Fu Shuxi, it would always be different. There is only one life and one would need to take a chance at it. Wouldn't it be the same with marrying a wife? Prince Jing's words had an additional meaning. Until the end of it, who would know what the outcome would be? Prince Zhou heard the temptation made by his own younger brother to Fu Shuyi. His eyes shifted but he did not speak. It was not long later when the examiners came out and announced the results. In the Qin category, as expected, it was Feng and Ning that came out on top. Originally there was no one particularly powerful and Feng and Ning could be regarded as the most prominent one. She naturally was happy as she went up to collect the examination certificate and happily came down to show it to Feng Furen. Feng Furen looked happy as such a glory like this would be the icing on the cake. Even the female would not be an official. Noble and rich families' children naturally do not lack of wealth or valuables but their talent and beauty would be able to separate them on different grades. Feng and Ning used the academy examinations and elevated her grade up a level. In the chess category, it was Bai Wei that came up on top. The records of the preceding chess match were shown from the people below to view to ensure fairness. Shen Miao glanced at the chess game and repeated the moves in her mind. Bai Wei's game was meticulous and could last the longest. Unfortunately too much attention was placed in trifles details and there was no better focus on the overall situation which hindered the progress and making it somewhat a burden. For the literary category, Shen Qing only got the second rank. The first rank belonged to Yi Pei Lan. Her poem of a blooming chrysanthemum's complaints was elegant and adorable, even though it was a little excessive for an unmarried young lady to write such a poem, but Guang Wentang was a place that broke through etiquettes and was not too harsh on female requirements. In addition, the poem was written in an interesting and adorable manner and not merely from a chrysanthemum's point of view but using a chrysanthemum to voice out one's thought and thus added another higher level. Shen Qing's expression was not good but she was naturally not good at writing poetry thus was very helpless at the result. Finally it was Shen Miao's group on painting. On the stage the examiners' expressions were mixed and it was most probably that this was what the dispute was about. The females started to speculate that it was that Shen Yu's and Qing Qin's pieces had their own merits and it would be hard to make a choice. After all, both of them were often compared against one another in Guang Wentang. Qing Qin sat in her original position arrogantly as if she scorned the result but the fingers that were holding the teacup stiffened. In contrast, it was Shen Yu who seemed much more calmer. She sat beside Chen Ruchu, looking somewhat coquettish and shy while Chen Ruchu looked at her warmly. This daughter of hers was intelligent and talented and was as outstanding as her, well versed in the 4 scholarly arts. She would be the most outstanding one in every academy examinations, second to none. Seeing her being that cheerful, she must be extremely certain of the results today. Shen Yu naturally had a well thought up plan. Her brush strokes showed strength. It was interesting and even the conception of it was all thought out. It was as if she had found out the preferences of these examiners for her to always come out with the best works. So what if Qing Qin looked beautiful? It was only to look at and of no use. Thinking of useless, her eyes landed on Shen Miao who was sitting at the side. Shen Miao had made her suffer such a big damage and she thought that Shen Miao would make a fool of herself in the academy, but who knew that she went through it safely. Now when the pieces are all displayed for everyone's viewing, Shen Miao would not be able to escape ridicule. Anyhow, she would be a joke, and a trace of comfort flashed in Shen Yu's heart. The examiner who was responsible for reading the results shouted out on the stage loudly, painting group's first rank, Shen Miao. Shen Miao, first rank. One stone created 1,000 ripples. Everyone created a ruckus that the names of subsequent ranks that were read by the examiner were drowned in it. Shen Yu's smile stiffened on her face in a moment as she looked at Chen Ruchu with an incredible look and spoke with a trembling voice, Mother, just now. Just now, who was the first ranked? I must have heard it wrong. Chen Ruchu pinched Shen Yu's arm. Even though there were shock and anger in her heart, she ate a few decades of rice more than Shen Yu, and thus knew that under such a situation there will be many who would certainly watch Shen Yu's reaction. If Shen Yu was magnanimous, it would be good, but if she was like it was a matter of life or death like before, she would be at a disadvantage. Although Shen Qing and Ren Wanyan were gloating that it was the first time that Shen Yu has lost her face, they were also shocked when that person was Shen Miao. They thought that the examiner had mistaken Shen Yu for Shen Miao. There were continuous discussion among the female side of the banquet, and naturally there was an uproar in the male side. What is going on? Why was it not little Yu? Kai Lin suddenly stood up and looked at his classmate sitting beside him. Was it me that heard it wrong? It was that old man that wrongly read it, right? He was not the only one thinking that. Especially the youths who were Shen Miao's classmates had a shocked look in their eyes. Eldest brother, see, I knew that she would win. Su Ming Lang tugged Su Ming Feng. In this group of people, it was most likely that he was the happiest of all, and the fats on his fair face also followed along and trembled. Su Ming Feng's head was also aching. Who knew that it was Shen Miao? Every year there would be underground betting for the academy examinations, and he bet Shen Yu for 1,000 liang. Finished. 1,000 liang were squandered away just like that. If Master Su were to know, he would definitely tear him apart. Looking at Su Ming Lang, who was jumping for joy, Su Ming Feng wanted to cry, but there were no tears. Pei Lang frowned, but he did not look at the examiners on stage and instead looked at the purple-clad young lady in the middle of the female side of the banquet. She was exceptionally calm and was indifferent with all the surprises and doubts from others. She had long known that she would win. The discussion continued while the examiners on stage showed the crowd the paintings to view and to display the fairness of the results. Fan Luer's and Zhao Yan's painting was a road of a blooming garden scene. In all fairness, it was pretty but was too ordinary, thus they naturally were ranked the lower. Qin Qing painted a large red fairy chrysanthemum. Most probably she was mostly familiar with this breed of chrysanthemum, and the entire painting only depicted this one. Every fiber of it was drawn, making it look exceptionally lifelike. It can be considered that in a way that she totally ignored the artistic conception and focused entirely on her drawing ability. A red fairy drawing that appeared vividly on the paper was very beautiful, but the academy examinations weren't just to test one's painting techniques but also to examine the intention of the painting. Thus no matter how beautiful this chrysanthemum was, it could only be ranked third. Very quickly it was Shen Yu's piece. Shen Yu bit her lips as she sat by Chen Ruchu's side, with a barely maintained smile on her face, but her fist was firmly tightened. If it was the usual, she would definitely smile lightly like clouds and breeze as she accepted everyone's sincere praise and envy. But now, this second rank was like a deep sarcasm which made her feel that everyone was looking at her with eyes filled with taunts and ridicule. Shen Yu's painting was on residual chrysanthemum. The rain and wind came and many of the chrysanthemum petals had fallen, but there were still sporadic petals that were firmly attached to the bud, and the stem still remained straight, as if it was the integrity of a great person. There was also two sentences at the side, would rather die with fragrance on the branch than fly away with the northern wind. This painting's thoughts were considered lofty. Generally, painting was an extension of a person, and as the residual chrysanthemum was noble, one could tell that the person drawing it definitely had a lofty integrity. The chief examiner's favorite was such people with talent and character, thus if Shen Yu's painting was unable to achieve first rank, it was really impossible to imagine what Shen Miao had drawn. The painting is that good. How was this at second rank? Bai Wei cried out, I really do not understand at all. Chen Ruchu also did not comprehend. Initially she thought that Shen Yu was somewhat nervous and strayed off the path. Who knew that when the painting was brought out, she now knew that her own daughter did not do anything wrong. As in previous years, this would be indeed a well-deserved first rank. But why was there a different result this time? Ren Wanyan was somewhat rejoicing in their misfortune. Shen Yu was outstanding in her talents and would suppress Shen Qing in the academy examinations in every category, thus to see Shen Yu suffering this time, even though Shen Miao winning first rank made her unhappy, it also did not matter to her. She was overall happy to watch the fun in front of her. The examiner on stage instructed the two pages to open the painting scroll and the noises stopped short. The drawing paper was very large and Shen Miao's painting had many white areas. Her drawing skills were originally not outstanding, so she only painted a vague scene, but unexpectedly it had a magnificent atmosphere on it. In the scroll, the yellow sand was endless with a bloody setting sun that seemed to overflow, and a broken sword stood up in the middle of the yellow earth with a white chrysanthemum at the end of it. In there, the chrysanthemum was just for show as it was so small that one cannot even see the flower petals. However, in this picture it was like painting a dragon and dotting the eyes, making it bring out the desolate sense of desired gorgeousness. Everyone present quieted down for a moment. The paper and ink separated it, but one could feel the desolation and misery of a powerless struggle. That was war. Chen Ruchu and Shen Yu trembled at the same time. Seeing clearly what was painted in the scroll, they knew that in this match there was definitely no possibility of a comeback for them. It was indeed true that Shen Yu's piece was indeed elegant. The strength of her piece flowed throughout without being gaudy, and it has character and felt noble. But Shen Miao's painting was like it has stripped the person away. If one were to say that Shen Yu was borrowing the chrysanthemum to sing to other, then Shen Miao was borrowing the flower to speak about one's purpose. How could a person's emotions be compared to the brutality of war? No wonder those examiners were disputing just now and delayed reaching a verdict. They mostly likely did not think that such a magnificent painting was actually drawn by the hands of Shen Miao, an idiot. The chief examiner, professor from the government cabinet, Zhang Ziqi spoke. Student Shen Miao, come up and speak of the rationale of drawing this painting. Every student who achieved first rank would have to talk about the sentiment before the event. However, today the main reason for letting Shen Miao talk about the origin of the painting was naturally because everyone did not believe that she could come out with such a painting and feared that it was an idea she heard about. Shen Qing smiled and whispered to Yi Pei Lan, who was sitting beside her, the cat will be out of the bag. Is this really not her painting? Yi Pei Lan was puzzled. Just now we have all seen that she herself drew every single stroke. Her drawing skills were not outstanding, and as for the intention of the painting, who knows if there was someone advising her. Shen Qing looked in disdain towards Shen Miao as she walked to the stage. I have been living with her for so many years, I still don't know what she can do. The examiners want her to speak about the origins of the painting, and if she is unable to say anything, I fear that she will lose all of her face there. Yi Pei Lan also laughed when she heard it. I'll say, how can it be possible to become a talented female? I am afraid that it was all done to attract that person. Her eyes ambiguously swept towards the area where Prince Ding was sitting, to request guidance of someone superior. Shen Miao has left no stone unturned for him. Shen Qing's expression stiffened as she suppressed the unhappiness in her heart and said, just watch. Up on stage, Shen Miao quietly looked at the open scroll. Her hand slowly reached out and stroked the picture, surprising everyone. The reason for painting this scene was only because of listening to what my father previously said. Every year in the battlefield, there was countless number of brave warriors' corpses that were wrapped in cloth as they perished on the yellow sand that they fell. The distance was far flung, thus they could only bury them in the battlefield, and at that time there were no chrysanthemum in the northwestern desert and the northern plains. Chrysanthemums blossoms in the warmer south, bloom in the flourishing Ding capital. The songs and dances were of peace and happiness, and where food and clothing were not a thing to worry about, but this was at the cost of the lives of the soldiers that were protecting the borders. As the discussions gradually stopped, everyone's eyes were gathered on the purple-clad young lady. Her eyes were calm and she spoke like she was telling a story. My father once spoke that because of the war, the soldiers that had perished would not have a single chrysanthemum. There would not be any flower blooming in the battlefields, and the soldiers would not even have the time to grieve. And their wives and children can only be separated far away and wear a white chrysanthemum on their head while white chrysanthemums are presented to them. I was thinking that for everyone to could calmly enjoy and appreciate chrysanthemum today, the reason was because there are brave warriors that are guarding the borders. It is a pity that I am unable to do anything for them but to paint a white chrysanthemum in a scene of the yellow soil to comfort their brave souls. The young lady stood in the wind with a pair of clear eyes and resounding voice, as if in the heaven and earth only her words were sweet sounding but were like a morning bell and evening drums, beating in everyone's heart. Shen Miao's eyes slightly drooped down. Didn't the heavenly family of Mingqi want to deal with the large and influential aristocratic families and deal with the Shen family? But the world was large and everyone's eyes could see and everyone's ears could listen. Stopping people's mouth was more difficult than damming rivers, so she would preemptively strike first. Since the heavenly family want to use the general residence as an example, then she would want the entire world to watch. Look, the Shen family risked their lives to achieve meritorious services. The Shen family used their lives to defend the walls of Mingqi. The peace and prosperity that you noble youths were enjoying now were all built on the blood and flesh of those that were cut down in the battlefield. Trampling on the blood of the soldiers, did the Mingqi imperial family still dare to suppress them with great fanfare? If you dared, then don't be afraid of the eyes of everyone in the world. The most supreme was the imperial power. But more powerful than the imperial power were the commoners' mouths. Of course one could use iron and bloody methods to suppress them down, but till that day comes, the commoners dare not to speak nonsense and words would only spread through jokes and would not be a big offense. The imperial family of Mingqi was probably like this. Inwardly they had obviously done so many filthy deeds, but to the outside world, they still put on a farce of being devoted to the empire. They have no qualms to receive the aristocratic family's sacrifices and protection, but at the end still wanted to beat them down. Hearing Shen Miao's remarks, everyone started to gradually quieten down. Daughters were thinking of the glory of their ancestors. If they were from military lineage, they would be moved. As for male students, as they were at the age when they were hot-blooded, they naturally worshipped heroes, since soldiers who fought in the battlefields would be admired wherever they went. But there were some people who were not so happy. The three princes of Mingqi that were present all coincidentally frowned. Others may not know, but they knew what the imperial family's intention for the aristocratic families were. The Shen family was a tall tree that attracted the wind and sooner or later will be eradicated by the emperor with some excuse. Due to the uncontrollable good reputation of the Shen family on the commoners, it would not be an overnight matter to bring them down. For Shen Miao to say such words, it seems to be mourning for the fallen soldiers, but in fact eulogizing the meritorious achievements and put officers and soldiers in the stage where everyone was looking. If the imperial family did any shred of inappropriate, by virtue, they would be in the wrong. Were her actions intentional? Everyone looked up and stayed silent after the young lady finished speaking. Her robes were slightly large and made fluttering sound as the cold wind blew past it, making her stature endlessly fragile. Most likely her thoughts had strayed off since she was an unmarried daughter. This time the reason she uncharacteristically came out onto the top position was because she was Shen Shen's daughter, and it was just a coincidence that he spoke about the events of a battlefield. Prince Yu's of first-rank eyes followed closely with the purple-clad young lady, and after a moment he suddenly gave a profound smile. This Shen family's daughter is indeed very interesting. No one knew why, but when Prince Yu said these words, Pei Lang and Fu Shuyi frowned at the same time as a bad premonition hinted in their hearts. Prince Zhou heard it and asked meaningfully, does royal uncle fancy that young lady from the Shen family? According to the rumors, the young lady from the Shen family is an ignorant idiot, but now it seems she is not. She is clever, eloquent, and look not so bad. If there would be a royal sister-in-law, his laughter was extremely uncouth, that would be very interesting. Prince Jing thought further than his older blood brother. As of now, even if the imperial family was determined to suppress the Shen family had the military power, and it was like an idiot carrying a treasure. If any of the princes acquired the Shen family's assistance, it would be a huge bargaining chip on the road to the throne. However, if Shen Miao married Prince Yu, since he had no more energy to fight for the highest position, it would be equivalent to placing the military power back to the imperial family, and perhaps the best method of not letting any prince covet after it. Thinking about this, Prince Jing nodded. The young lady of the Shen family is shrewd and creative. If royal uncle feels good, that would be understandable. Fu Shuyi's brows wrinkled much more. He naturally took into account what Prince Jing thought about. He knew that if Shen Miao were to marry into Prince Yu residence, it would be 100 advantage and no harm to him at all. First of all, he could free himself from Shen Miao's entanglement and there would be one less joke about him. Second was that Shen Shen's military power was an extremely hot potato, and even if he intended to use it, he was afraid that it would ignite the emperor's suspicion. It would be better to be placed in Prince Yu residence and wait for an opportunity to use it. But he did not know why there was an annoying feeling in his heart, like it was not right to do it like that. Pei Lang worriedly looked at Shen Miao, who was coming down from the state. She leisurely walked down with a calm expression, as she most likely did not know that her own destiny was already in the hands of these sons of the imperial family. He sighed in his heart. After all, they were teacher and student, but he was just a small and low-ranked teacher who was unable to change anything and could only feel sorry for Shen Miao in his heart. Prince Yu waved his hands somewhat impatiently, and even though he did not seem necessarily happy, there was some ruthlessness in his smile. Royal nephew, Benwei Ng does not necessarily not know what your intentions are. Prince Yu's residence cannot swallow such a big Buddha like the Shen family. His eyes landed on his own crippled leg, but young lady Shen is interesting and it would not be bad to play with her. Su Mingfeng glanced over to this side. He was seated closer to Fu Shuyi and the rest, and looked as if he was seriously watching the situation on the stage, but there were some grievances in his heart. Even if Shen Miao was an idiot or stupid, if she was eyed by Prince Yu, everything would point to disaster. It would be fortunate if Shen Shen was in the Ding capital, but unfortunately he would only return after the end of the year. Without her father or older brother to protect her, how would a young lady be able to compete with these vicious wolves? As if he had already expected what tragic ending would happen, Su Mingfeng sighed and brought Su Minglang to Master Su before leaving the banquet area. Shen Miao was unaware of the changing situation at the male side of the banquet. Jing Jie was very happy for Shen Miao, but it was Shen Yu who was finally unable to maintain a good expression and left the banquet somewhat stiffly. After the female group of examinations, it was time for the male group to take their turn. There were already many young ladies who had left the banquet after taking the examinations. Feng and Ning followed beside Shen Miao, and this previously proud young lady finally showed a convinced look to Shen Miao before saying, "What you did just now was really good. It was really great." Shen Miao replied plainly, you were also good. Mostly likely Feng and Ning was thinking about receiving the first rank for Qin category as she said smilingly, time cannot defeat determination. I will go to the carriage to pick up something, wait for me here. After Feng and Ning left, Shen Miao walked to the middle of Bei Yantang's plum blossom forest to wait for her. In this season, the plum blossoms had not yet flourished and the trees were very lush. Gu Yu walked out from inside and looked around before whispering, young lady, had already sent it to the young master of the historian advisor Jing by bribing the footboy from outside to switch it to ensure that it was secure. Very good, Shen Miao said. Gu Yu was somewhat confused and did not understand why her own young lady would do such a thing. There was no possibility of her own young lady to be familiar with the young master of the historian advisor Jing. Just at the same time, one heard a chuckle from up above one's head. The three of them raised their heads and saw that near the top of the branches there was a purple figure floating down and fell in front of them. That purple-clad youth was so handsome that he did not look like a mortal. He folded his hands across his chest as he leaned against the trunk of the tree and there was a smile but not really a smile on his lips as his eyes brought out a chilly cold look that was like Ding Capital's winter night. It was Xie Jingxing. Young mistress, Gu Yu and Jing Jie were somewhat vigilantly protective in front of Shen Miao and made gaps with their somewhat loud shouts. Moreover, this richly clad youth was extremely good and noble looking that one could not help but be suspicious of his identity. At the end, he was a stranger, thus Gu Yu and Jing Jie were afraid that something unexpected might happen. Gu Yu, Jing Jie, go and stand guard at the entrance of the forest. Shen Miao said. But young lady, both of them were somewhat hesitant. Go then, Shen Miao slightly frowned. They did not know why but she was now adept at giving orders. Every time when orders were given to the servants, there would also be an unfathomable majestic feeling, making others dare not refute them. Jing Jie and Gu Yu could only retreat and stood guard at the entrance of the forest. You are indeed interesting. Xie Jingxing leaned against the tree trunk as he looked at her in amusement. He was clearly a noble and precious young master, but unexpectedly he had a sharp vision like the bloodshed during battle and that monotonous tone had a cold chill in it. After all, he was one who has seen blood in the battlefield. What does Marquis Xie wants to say? Shen Miao questioned. Xie Jingxing suddenly appeared and naturally it was not for an idle chat. Although this person was young, his actions were decisive that even the old Marquis was incapable to control him. The way he handled things was more presumptuous, making others unable to clearly understand his course of actions. Prince Yu residence is lacking of a Wangfei and that cripple seemed to have taken an interest in you so I wanted to say a word of congratulations. His manner of speaking was unclear. However, to use the term cripple on Prince Yu could be considered as bold, but coming from Xie Jingxing there was a trace of contempt and mockery as if Prince Yu was an extremely dirty thing and nothing more. This person's aspiration was very high. Shen Miao was deeply in thoughts but on the surface she did not show any significant impact as if she had forgotten what this calm look would mean to the other's eyes. Xie Jingxing suddenly took a step forward. He had such a tall stature that Shen Miao's entire self was covered by his shadow. That purple-clad youth slightly leaned forward and to her ear said, you indeed already knew about it. A scent of cold bamboo fragrance spread out as his voice was deliberately suppressed as if it had some kind of ambiguous magnetic force. This action was also equivocal, making Shen Miao to raise her eyes as she looked at that handsome face in front of her. The corner of his lips hooked up, adding some evil touch to his smile. But she was after all not a real budding young lady. Her eyes slightly hang down as she said, so what if I know and what if I don't? When Xie Jingxing saw that she remained nonchalant, he did not bother to continue to put on an appearance of a rich playboy, and did not have even a trace of protective feelings for a female as he pushed her away. There was a piece of paper in his hands as he smiled a bit frivolously, knowing but not being anxious about your own matter, but worry for historian advisor Jing's second young master. Shen Miao abruptly moved her line of sight and stared at him fixedly as she could not help but be a bit brutal with her tone, as Marquis Xie being too meddlesome. You are actually nervous because of a piece of paper. Xie Jingxing restored that look of cynicism on his face. What kind of relationship do you have with historian advisor Jing's number 2 to help him to this extent? Or perhaps, what is little Shen girl playing at? Shen Miao's face was as deep as water as she quietly stared at the paper in Xie Jingxing's hands. The paper was very thin but it was as heavy as a rock in her heart. That was her recalling for a long time before she could write the circulation of law. In her past lifetime, Pei Lang relied on this essay to be discovered by Fu Shuyi and afterwards became Fu Shuyi's aide to advise strategies for the country. And now when he had yet to reveal his talents, Shen Miao had to cut it off before that possibility happened. Not only that, the most secure approach would be that Pei Lang would never get to serve the imperial family in any capacity. As for the historian advisor Jing's second young master, Gao Yan, he was from a long line of aristocratic family clans that rose to nobility. Since Ming Qi's imperial family wanted to suppress the old aristocratic family clans, naturally had to support the new nobilities. Historian advisor Jing's family was one of the newer significant support. Historian advisor Jing's eldest young master was a true talent that Fu Shuyi guided personally when he ascended the throne. Historian advisor Jing's family received such grace and became more rampant and overbearing that Gao Yan even dared to covet for her Wan Yu. If she was not the mistress of the 6 palaces and Fu Shuyi had yet to begin to deal with the Shen family, she was afraid that Wan Yu would have suffered brutal schemes. This Gao Yan's talents were not as high as his elder brother, but was very arrogant and always liked to speak of his elder brother's achievements like they were his own. His personality was very flawed and narrow-minded, generally like a scoundrel who will stir shit up. In the past life Gao Yan did not enter the official circles, and in this lifetime historian advisor Jing's family have yet to reach the peak of their heydays. Gao Jing just entered the officialdom, thus she used more energy to send Gao Yan into the magnanimous official circles. She naturally took Pei Lang's circulation of law to give it to Gao Yan because she knew that in every academy examinations, Gao Yan would let his servants go by the examination papers outside. This year she instructed Gu Yu to arrange others to replace them with this essay. With Fu Shuyi's personality of cherishing talents, he would definitely bring him over to his side regardless of everything. As for that vain personality of Gao Yan, he would definitely not confess that this was not his handwriting. With such a person entering Ming Qi's official circles, she would like to see when he meet Fu Shuyi, how these two people would be in a dogfight. Cutting Fu Shuyi's powerful arm and exchanging it with an empty brain stick of feces. Shen Miao was playing with such a good idea like this, but who knew that Xie Jingxing would interrupt in the middle of it and make her plan fail for no good reason. Her eyes were flickering as if thousands of words were all converged to a pair of beast's eyes. Xie Jingxing finally smiled and lazily spoke, you need not necessarily look at me with such a hateful expression. This paper was copied by my people and the original is in the hands on that Gao family's kid. Shen Miao was slightly surprised for a moment as she did not imagine that the result was as such. She looked at Xie Jingxing and became silent for a moment before saying, little Marquis has a big heart. Not big-hearted, it is just that this Marquis has a little self-recognition reputation. Xie Jingxing looked slightly cold, of not liking to meddle in other people's affairs. Just as Shen Miao wanted to speak, she heard Xie Jingxing's voice again, now can you tell this Marquis why you write it for historian advisor Jing? Shen Miao sighed in her heart. Even though she had the heart to tie the Shen and Xie families to the same boat, but now was still not the time yet. The Shen and Xie had long-term discords between them and those cannot be resolved overnight. It had to be conspired in a long draw-out plan, but who knew that Xie Jingxing got involved, disrupting the entire plan up. She did not believe in anyone as she has her own road to walk. Be it Xie Jingxing or the Xie family, they were just pieces of chess in the chess game of the world. There would not exist a chess player explaining things to a chess piece. This marquis thought that for you to help Gao Yan this much, you must have some personal considerations with him and thus wanted to help your lover to snatch the limelight. Xie Jingxing smiled mischievously as he eyed Shen Miao up and down. After some thinking, even though the number 2 of the Gao family was not worthy of respect, his eye for females was indeed not bad. He looked at Shen Miao. She clearly had very beautiful features but was like the northwestern desert that stings people. Furthermore, to help Gao Yan meant helping historian advisor Jing's reputation, but you however did not help Gao Jing but instead that wastrel Gao Yan, making it seem malicious and duplicitous. His smile harbored malicious intentions but his words went straight to the target. Little Shen girl, do you have enmity with historian advisor Jing? 19 to 38. Little Shen girl, do you have enmity with historian advisor Jing? Shen Miao quietly watched the youth in front. His facial features were beautiful but his heroic spirits were rather pressing. Even though he had a rich playboy appearance, he had a kind of serious air that was transcendent to his age. It was not shown in his appearance but like it was following him as if there was a kind of sense of safety feeling that one would feel even if the heavens fell. Even if she was in Qin country or in the inner palace, she had never seen such a through person. With just one sentence, he could discern the middle of everything. For such a brilliant and talented person to die prematurely, it was truly that the heavens were jealous of heroic geniuses. Pity flashed in her eyes but when she spoke again, her voice was flat and plain, yes. You have taken the roundabout route for this chess game. Xie Jingxing examined her closely, to go about such a meandering way just to send Gao Yan into the official circles. Could it be that you want to throw Ming Qi's official circles into disorder? Even Shen Miao, who had lived for 2 lifetimes, could not help but feel slightly surprised. She could say that Xie Jingxing's performance was overtly smart and was able to immediately conclude things with one hint. Now this person was truly scary. Ordinary people would take a step and look at the next step. Smart people would take a step and see the next 10 steps. With those seemingly ordinary words, Xie Jingxing took a step and saw thousands of miles away. To be that unabashedly and get straight to the point, it made her somewhat unsure of how to respond. After a moment she then replied, what does it got to do with little Marquis? This Marquis is not concerned of Ming Qi's official circles but the Marquis of Linen must not be touched. There were some warnings in his tone. If you have any intentions for the residents of the Marquis of Linen, then don't blame this Marquis for being rude. Shen Miao took a look at him. Xie Jingxing had always loathed the Marquis of Linan's residence extremely, and loved to go against his father. But now it seems that it was not complete hatred. In fact, he seemed to have the Marquis of Linen in his heart. Otherwise, he would not have protected the reputation of the entire Marquis of Linan's residence in the last lifetime and ending up with tens of thousands of arrows piercing his heart. And it was also understandable for Xie Jingxing to be suspicious of her acting upon the Xie family. The Shen and Xie families had never been able to see eye to eye, and with her current actions that no one seemed to understand, it would seem to others that it was possible that the Shen family would make the Xie family stumble. Marquis Xie can be rest assured. She plainly spoke with a tone as if she was speaking of the weather today. The Xie and Shen families are like well water not intruding with the river water, thus naturally would not cause any trouble. What Marquis Xie worries about would not happen. A person's life is only a short few decades. The reversal of the wheel of fortune could also happen. The Xie family view the Shen family as enemies, but who would know if there would be a day in the future where they would be in the same boat under the wind and rain to deal with the same enemy? Is this you expressing your goodwill to me? Xie Jingxing raised his eyebrows. Yes, Shen Miao calmly said. Xie Jingxing sized the young female in front of him. From when he was born till present, he had seen countless of women. When he was young, those women wanted to get closer to his father and afterwards, those women got closer to him. Among these women, there were those who had flowery words, those who were devastatingly beautiful, those who could brandish swords and spears and even those who were scheming and resourceful. Xie Jingxing had seen thousands types of smart people but not one of them made him feel surprised like this person in front of him. Perhaps it was the intuition that was born at the tip of the sword on the battlefield. Xie Jingxing could smell the bloodthirst from this young female. As if there was a pool of stagnant water but there was a lurking fierce beast in the bottom. At the moment the surface looked calm and peaceful, it did not move and was waiting for a chance to break through the sun, and when that day happened, there would be a reign of terror. Although this looked rather ridiculous, how much of a storm could an unmarried female stir? But Xie Jingxing was one that never underestimated his own intuition. Under the lotus purple cloak that was being blown by the wind, the young female's face was somewhat frozen, but the lush plum blossom forest made her seem to stand out like one from the palace. Noble, lonely, decisive, bottomless like an abyss. The Shen family unexpectedly has such a smart person. His remarks had a somewhat ridiculing tone but there was some firmness as he spoke. This being the case, then you should do as you wish. I would treat today as watching a good show. You better not disappoint this Marquis. He stood up and turned around to leave. Marquis Xie. Shen Miao called to stop him. What other matters are there? He stood still and asked without looking back. The 2 Shu younger brothers of the Xie family would also go up on stage in the academy examinations. Shen Miao said lightly, would Marquis Xie indulge that much? The 2 Shu younger brothers of the Xie family were born from a Yinyang, Madame Fang, and both, Xie Chongwu and Xie Chongchao were currently in grade 2. In fact, Xie Jingxing was also Guang Wentang's grade 3 student, but because he did as his own wishes, Guang Wentang was unable to restrain him and thus they let him be. Otherwise Xie Jingxing would be taking the academy examinations with his grade 2 Shu younger brothers. In the previous life, Xie Jingxing of course did not participate in the academy examinations and his 2 Shu younger brothers were able to grab the limelight. In all fairness, Xie Chongwu and Xie Chongchao were considered very capable and among the best in martial category. Therefore, they caught the emperor's eyes and later were deliberately promoted by Fu Shuyi to handle matters for him. Shen Miao had always felt that the Marquis of Linen and his son were smart people and wondered how did they end up like that in the past lifetime. Although the imperial family gave out aid, the ones who received the shade were those 3, mother and sons. In fact, with careful considerations, there was no lack of doubts. For instance, the collapse of the Shen family in the previous lifetime, there was a helping hand from the 2nd and 3rd household. So it would seem that there was also a problem within the Xie family. You are hoping that this Marquis would go up and compete with them. Xie Jingxin looked back as he said with some surprise, just like you fighting with your older sister. How would Marquis Xie's situation be the same as mine? Shen Miao ignored his words of ridicule and said, the deepest knife is precisely in the hands of the closest people. I naturally understand that Marquis Xie is a noble person and would not worry unduly over minor matters with the Shu sons. But a 1,000-mile dike was destroyed by an ant's nest. A seemingly unremarkable plaything it may look like, but it's a venomous snake in the darkness. Her every word and sentence was spoken very clearly. It was very clearly a warning tone, but her eyes were as clear as a young child. One must cut them off in the bud and ensure that they would never be able to sprout. Comparing to letting them have unlimited support from nobles, for these snake-like brothers, to compete with them and let them make a fool of themselves in front of everyone, wouldn't one be more delighted than pretending in the residence? Xie Jingxing's heart moved. His mother was the blue-blooded noble Princess Yu Qing, and he did not want it to be bothered with the Shu sons, as these people would say that his bearing was not up there and mention that his birth mother was angered to death by jealousy when she was pregnant. He did not care about his own reputation, but he would forever take into account Princess Yu Qing's reputation. In Marquis of Linan's residence, he would treat the mother and sons, those three people, coldly. Even though the Marquis of Linan would be biased towards him, outsiders would gossip unnecessarily. All that those three needed to do was to show a respectful and loving appearance, which made him nauseous. He just wanted to be like an outsider watching the three of them acting, thus Shen Miao's words made his heart move. If one were to extinguish their hope, wouldn't it be more fun? To shed all pretense of cordiality and let them be frustrated of being unable to show the face of being respectful. Shen Miao's voice seemed to be somewhat bewitching as she said, "It has been a long time. Don't tolerate. Don't tolerate." He lowered his head and looked at the person in close proximity. That young female had a light scent of delicate fragrance just like herself, looking pure in appearance but in actuality cold and indifferent. He obviously knew the purpose of the suggestion, but one was unable to refuse it. His lips hooked up to a smile, and with a sweep of his sleeves, the begonia flower was falling onto his palm. In the next second, where the begonia flower was before, there was now a small jade begonia in its place. He smiled, yet he did not smile as he picked up the flower and spoke with an ambiguous tone, "You are interesting. This flower is bestowed to you. The suggestion is not bad. Many thanks." When Shen Miao exited the plum blossom forest, Gu Yu and Jing Jie felt finally relieved. Jing Jie took a peek inside and did not saw any figure and thus asked doubtfully, "Why is there no one?" Shen Miao also took a glance back. The leaves of the forest were lush and gently swaying with the wind. How could anyone see any figure? Xie Jingxing was someone who practices martial arts and most probably could disappear by flying away. She said, "Let's leave." When they were back in the banquet, Feng and Ning ran over in a rush and complained, "Didn't we agree for you to wait for me?" Just a turn of the head and one was unable to see anyone. Upon returning, you were also not here. Where exactly did you go? Seeing that the chrysanthemum blossomed well, I casually walked around. Shen Miao raised her eyes and looked towards the stage. Has it started? You were gone for a long time. The choosing portion for the male groups was over. Feng and Ning's lips curled. Now it is the male group turn for the selecting portion. The youths on stage were in the midst of competing. The first round of drawing lots were over, but Shen Miao did not care of the results. The second round was selection, which was to select the areas that one was good at. Shen Miao's eyes fell on the other far left side of the banquet, at the aqua green clad youth. This youth was fit, dark, and his facial features were not bad. It was only that his overly sturdy stature made him look rough. And even so he still chose to wear green robes, making his complexion to appear even darker. Not only that, he still combed his hair up and binded it with a jade bamboo hairpin. Most likely he was trying to follow the example of a gentleman, but because he also wanted an appearance of wealth, his semblance was somewhat nondescript. In a nutshell, although he wanted to look distinguished, but because of him trying to imitate someone else, he failed to gain the desired effect and looked tacky. This was Gao Yan of the historian advisor Jing's family. Gao Yan was still young this year, not surpassing 16, and his feathers were not even grown. Until after Fu Shuyi ascended to the throne, and because Gao Yan rode on Gao Jing's wind as the latter's status rose, he would act tyrannically in the Ding capital and was extremely bold to even dare to covet after Wan Yu. As long as she thought about Wan Yu who would suffer Gao Yan's words of provocation, Shen Miao would become furious. She stared at Gao Yan as if she was watching a prey walking into a trap. At that moment Gao Yan thought about something and talked to Gao Jing with a look of joy on his face. He was naturally happy as he had obtained such a unique worded essay, since during the drawing lots he had picked righteousness, which resulted in a mediocre performance. He waited for the selection to bring out this essay and then he would be able to startle the entire audience. Shen Miao sneered in her heart. Go then, take this essay and go to Fu Shuyi's side then. Enter officialdom before Gao Jing make progress in his career. She believed that with Gao Yan's high level of means and methods, he would be able to personal and single-handedly annihilate historian advisor Jing's residence. This was the big gift she was giving to historian advisor Jing. As for Pei Lang, she turned and looked at the man clad in a green robe sitting near Fu Shuyi. From now in this lifetime, you will start to slowly repay me for your past debts. Shen Miao, after the male groups are done, it would be the female group selection. What will you choose? Will not, Shen Miao answered. In the academy examinations, drawing lots was a category that all students had to participate. As for the selection category, it was of one's wishes, and if one did not want to, they need not participate. Thus in the selection category of the academy examinations, it was a category that could easily show one's abilities. If one has an area that was naturally good at, then it can also be performed in this selection category. Thus in the selection category, the crowd would have a higher level of enthusiasm. Because the performance from selection was the one in which they felt more confident. If it was the previous Shen Miao that had no strength, she would not have participated in the selection category, as she would only make a fool of herself if she went up. Why? Feng and Ning was somewhat disappointed and she said, currently your painting is good, so there should also be improvements on the other categories. Why not simply show it off? There is no need. Shen Miao started fiddling with the chess game on the table again and replied Feng and Ning without even lifting her head, there is no difference to me between being in the limelight or not. Moreover, I am not knowledgeable in the 4 scholarly arts and was only lucky just now. You, Feng and Ning was flustered and exasperated, how can anyone say that of themselves? Fifth younger sister. A voice interrupted their conversation. They did not know when Shen Yu stood in front of them with a worried expression on her face. Fifth younger sister, in the next round of selection, you would really not participate. Could it be that second elder sister wished for me to participate? Shen Miao answered the question with another question. Shen Yu was choked by her words. She did not know for why Shen Miao seemed to be bent on shedding all pretense of cordiality with recently, and it was making Shen Yu to become really puzzled. Was it possible that after the accident of falling into the water this had made her lash out on second and third household? Although she was doubtful, Shen Miao had been undiscriminating her in quick succession, accumulating anger in her heart. Shen Yu bit her lips and seemed to be somewhat aggrieved as she softly said, I naturally hoped that fifth younger sister would participate. Just now that painting was extremely done well, so since fifth younger sister possessed such great skills, why not continue to choose the topic painting since everyone is still talking behind your back? If the next painting is drawn well, the rumors will be discredited. Shen Yu's voice was not soft, and since she was surrounded by young ladies and Furin, naturally they clearly heard every single word. These words seemed to be nothing, but it voiced out the suspicions that everyone had in their heart. Even though Shen Miao's drawing of the white chrysanthemum had gotten the first rank, she has been an idiot for so many years. The perception in people's heart would not change easily, thus they did not believe that the painting came out from her and thought that there was someone at her side giving her pointers. Shen Yu also thought so in her heart, so she was thinking that as long as in the second round when Shen Miao draws another painting, without any helpful pointers, she would not be able to draw a good painting and would definitely make a fool of herself. Feng and Ning heard the knack of it and immediately ridiculed. Second Shen young lady spoke as if it is very easy. Painting pays particular attention to the desire of composition. Even if it was second young lady, it would not be possible to draw 2 paintings continuously. Shen Miao was only a student and not a master in painting and calligraphy. I only ask that after seeing fifth younger sister's improvement in skills. Shen Yu smiled gently. Just now such a good painting was able to be drawn, so why is it not possible to draw another one? Shen Miao did not raise her head from beginning to end and only placed a chess piece in the middle of the chess game before saying, not interested. You have worried. Shen Yu did not expect that Shen Miao would give such a lukewarm reply in front of so many people and was embarrassed for a moment. In this world the most annoying thing was to dig a trap but the other party chose not to fall into it. As Shen Miao was not even willing to accept her provocation in front of everyone's suspicions, this made Shen Yu think that the intention behind that painting came not from Shen Miao. Thus the thought of watching Shen Miao making a fool of herself ingrained deeply into her heart and she continued laughing after a pause. Since fifth younger sister insists, then I would not say more. She then turned around and returned to her seat. Over at the male side of the banquet, Kai Lin had been secretly watching Shen Yu when he suddenly saw Shen Yu looking over from afar and seemingly smiled at him gently. Kai Lin was startled following that, he was somewhat excited, but he saw Shen Yu bowing her head as if she was somewhat upset. He suddenly felt anxious. On the stage, the male group of selection continued. Essay topics on righteousness and poetry conforms with the norms of society, thus many would choose them. As long as one's memory was excellent and read thoroughly about the topic, it would be easy for anyone to perform well. In contrast, the essays on current affairs were only a few. An essay on current affairs aimed at the views on the current matters and situation at court and thus was very practical. This was the closest category to the affairs of court and as most of the students present were young, most of them would be ignorant of the court affairs, except for the few who at their residences were disciples of professors, there would not be any good essay on current affairs. Thus this essays were the hardest topic, but if one was able to perform well, it was as good as getting half of one's feet into the official circles. Shen Miao looked at the chess in front of her. In the past Pei Lang's circulation of law was composed during the third round, challenge. In this last round anyone could challenge anyone, males could challenge females and females could also challenge males, thus naturally students could pick their teachers to challenge. And one of the male students picked Pei Lang, a teacher. Pei Lang was also a brilliant talent. Within only a few steps into the stage, he was able to complete an essay on current affairs which was flowing with quotes from classics, but it was not exaggerated and every part of it was extremely crucial. It was simply stunning. At that time, many princes paid attention to it but Pei Lang was a smart person and said that he only wanted to be an accounting teacher in Guangwentang and wanted to not think about other matters. With such a determined mindset if Fu Shuyi did not approach him a number of times for his service and even Shen Miao had to come out with ideas, Pei Lang would most likely not enter officialdom. The game of chess was crisscrossed, just like her previous lifetime. She flicked her sleeves and the whole game was wrecked. Shen Miao picked up a piece and restarted the game. How about her starting first? Gao Yan fixed his sleeves and tidied his hair before asking the footboy beside him, how does this master looks like? Young master is suave, romantic, handsome, elegant, the footboy words flew out quickly as he opened his mouth. Gao Yan lips curled up proudly and was about to rise to walk over towards the stage. When Gao Jing saw that, he grabbed him and asked, what are you doing? Selecting, Gao Yan said. Gao Jing knitted his brows as he understood how much weight his younger brother had. It was alright if he had no talents but he loved to be in the limelight. Now with the entire court in attendance at the banquet, it was not the time to take the wrong turn. Gao Jing said, you know how. When these words landed in Gao Yan's ears, they sounded different. He and Gao Jing were blood brothers from the same mother but when people mentioned the Gao family, they would first praise Gao Jing. Gao Jing was born with delicate features but he was rugged and tan. He helped his father to handle things from a young age. However, every time he wanted to talk with his father about court affairs, his father would shake his head with impatience. Gao Jing and Gao Yan were brothers and there should not be any disagreement but because of how others view them, discord bloomed. Gao Yan felt inferior under his oldest brother's light and to hear Gao Jing's current words, he became angry. Initially he had some hesitation as the essay was too well written, but now there was not a trace of hesitation at all. He spoke in an unkind tone, eldest brother, although this younger brother is not as smart as you but he is not a total idiot. You need not hold me back as I would after all be unable to seize your limelight away. Gao Jing heard the meaning behind his words and paused. Before he could speak, Gao Yan pushed him aside and walked up the stage confidently. From afar a loud voice rang, I choose essay on current affairs. Essay on current affairs. It was not that no one knew about Gao Yan, so naturally there were some that looked over. Even though Gao Yan did not have any abilities, it was strange to say that he was rather good in Guangwentang. This was only because his homework and manuscripts were always written by others, thus he was not considered a great talent but was still regarded as outstanding. As a result when he went up the stage like this, the crowd did not feel that great of a surprise. This was because during the selecting category, one would usually prepare their best work in advance. As essay on current affairs had always been difficult, the usually noisy audiences gradually quietened down to look at the green-clad youth on the stage. The few students that had chosen essay on current affairs had already read their essays out in public. Even though they were not considered good, Gao Jing still frowned as Gao Yan walked up. Did not expect that Gao Yan to dare selecting an essay. Feng and Ning spoke with curiosity. If it was Gao Jing, I would feel that it would be better. Shen Miao stopped the chess game and looked towards the stage. After preparing everything, Gao Yan took out the sheet of paper and slowly read it out. By law, the foundation of the country is set in the framework to support as it soars to the skies. He read it out in a cadence of his own, making those people who were watching the commotion to gradually settle down. Especially the officials that were sitting in the banquet, who started to look seriously at the youth who was reading. Gao Jing's younger brother is indeed not bad. A flash of surprise appeared in Prince Zhou's eyes. The Darrens in court may not necessarily be so insightful as compared to such an essay like this. Indeed not bad. Prince Jing nodded as he praised. Moreover with such a young age, in time he would definitely be a significant personnel. Fu Shuyi watched the person on the stage quietly and there were no fluctuations to his expression. His hands however unconsciously twisted up. Whenever he has any thoughts or decisions, he would unconsciously do this action. Obviously Gao Yan's actions made him come out with new plans in his heart. As for Pei Lang, ever since Gao Yan read the first sentence, his entire body stiffened. For unknown reasons, he felt familiar with Gao Yan's essay on current affairs. But from his outstanding memory, he had not heard it before and was thus puzzled. But this feeling of extreme familiarity that hit onto his face actually made the usually calm him to feel peeved. As if after every sentence that Gao Yan read, he could follow up with the next sentence. It was incomparably familiar, as if it was his own work. Shen Miao smiled and did not continue to look at the youth on the stage but continued to look at the chess pieces on the chess set. She conveniently picked a piece and placed it at the edge of the chessboard. What kind of chess are you playing? Feng and Ning asked. It must be randomly playing. How would one place a piece so far away? Far. Shen Miao shook her head. Every chess piece had its own use. How far could this seemingly useless chess piece travel? Even if the current situation was thousands of miles away, but for the future general, it would become an integral part of the picture. Now, could one see it through? At a distant pavilion, there was a panoramic view of the stage. Su Mingfeng moved his fan and said, this time, I don't know where did Gao Yan found such an elegant and unconventional piece of essay. I would like to get acquainted with the author of this essay. Acquainted for what? Facing opposite him, the purple-clad youth said lazily. He was practically sitting in front of the pavilion window as he leaned against the frame with almost half of his body probing out. It should be a Darren with an encyclopedic knowledge. Su Mingfeng believed his thoughts. If one can become friends, one would definitely benefit. Xie Jingxing laughed out before turning his head to look towards the stage with an additional begonia in his hands. The begonia had yet to wilt, as if it was just plucked. It had a light scent, but this seemed to be somewhat harsh. That is not always certain. Up on stage, Gao Yan finally finished reading Circulation of Law. At the beginning the surroundings were silent before whispered discussion erupted. The students did not understand the meaning behind the essay but found that the words and citations were gorgeous. But the Darren sitting at the male side of the banquet understood the depth, and even though this essay seems inconsequential it could inadvertently point out the loopholes in Ming-Chi's laws and made clever suggestions on what changes to make. For a student, this was somewhat inconceivable. The examiners on the stage did not expect that Gao Yan was someone who hid his real knowledge. But rules were meant to be kept, thus when they were suspicious of a student performance, they would be tested, just like Shen Miao's painting before. In all fairness, this Circulation of Law was much superior than Shen Miao's painting as it was literally well written and practical. The examiner questioned, as for the essay that was read out, Ming-Chi's laws covers a wide scope, and as for the subcategories, what kind of breakdown should there be? Gao Yan's heart jumped for joy. Other than that Circulation of Law in the manuscript, there was also a question which was exactly the same as what the examiner had asked. He was really grateful to the person who helped him by writing this manuscript, and thought to reward some more money in the future. Therefore he calmly raised his head and answered accordingly to the manuscript. It is divided in 3 portions. Merchant's portion, official's portion and commoner's portion should respectively. Off the stage, historian advisor Jing was grinning from ear to ear. To reach his position in the official circle, he only relied on the emperor's support and his wide network. As for real abilities, he did not have any. It was good that he had a Gao Jing, a good son who could help him to deal with a lot of matters at his young age. Now with his second son who had displayed such unusual improvements in talents, he had to go to his ancestral hall to burn 2 big incense sticks as offerings. Gao Jing was smarter than his father and did not believe that his own younger brother could possess such wisdom. To be this eloquent even with the examiner's question, it could not be that he was able to bribe even the examiners. Thus, Gao Jing was unable to understand at all. Pei Lang picked the teacup on the table to take a sip but his hand was somewhat trembling. He did not know why, but every sentence that Gao Yan spoke felt as if was imprinted in his mind. That kind of familiarity made him feel ridiculous and the anxiety in his heart could not be quelled. Su Minglang took a short nap and upon waking up he saw the people around him staring at Gao Yan with a look of appreciation. He tugged Master Su's sleeves and asked, "Father, is what he spoke really good?" "A highly talented youth," Father Su directly commented. Su Minglang pouted as if it was incomprehensible. After turning around and not seeing Su Mingfeng's figure, he asked, "Why is oldest brother not back?" Master Su lightly coughed. "Now that your eldest brother is weak, it is actually with great reservations that he came today. So let him rest for a while more." Fu Shuyi heard the commotion there and glanced at Master Su. Seeing that Master Su was not even changing his expression when mentioning Su Mingfeng, he then moved his sight back thoughtfully. In any case, Gao Yan has fought today's battle very beautifully and as for the questions that the examiners posed, he could answer them naturally and thus dispel the suspicion in everyone's heart. Needless to say, he naturally had gotten a first rank. Ranking was only the second thing as from this day onwards when one mentions about historian advisor Jing, other than Gao Jing, everyone would know that he had a highly talented second son. Gao Yan stepped down the stage complacently. This round of selecting ended like this and it was now the turn of the selecting category for the female group. Feng and Ning did not go up the stage as she had already won first rank in Qin, and since she had already gotten the Qin in the drawing lots category and was not particularly gifted in other areas, there was no need to go up on stage. Shen Qing chose chess as she was good in calculation which was a slight advantage when playing chess. As expected for Shen Yu, she chose Qin. Shen Yu had always loved things that could highlight her refined appearance and because Chen Rushu has good Qin skills and could also compose some music and lyrics, Shen Yu then learned these skills well. Every year she would rank first and it was during this time that everyone would be able to listen and appreciate her Qin's abilities. In the female group, once there was Shen Yu in there, the others would not pick the Qin category and disgrace themselves. Shen Qing naturally also put in a lot of hard work and had gotten the first rank in the chess category. After going around, it was time for Qin and the audience started to discuss again. Shen Yu went up the stage and washed her hands in incense. She was born with an air of gracefulness and a gentle appearance which was truly moving. With a light smile on her lips, she really had an appearance of a little fairy. The piece she played was Singing to the Moon. Singing to the Moon was an extremely difficult piece and was about a distant traveler who was missing their homeland and loved ones. The beginning was gentle and wistful, followed by intense sadness before making one sob at the end. This piece tested the skills and talents of the player and was also an emotional piece. In the last lifetime, Shen Yu also made use of this piece to gain the limelight and for a period of time no one was second to her. As compared to Shen Miao who was much lower than her, it was even more unbearable. Now to think about it, every time Shen Yu gained a favorable reputation, it was stepping on Shen Miao's sorry situation to climb up. Shen Miao looked towards the young lady on the stage. Shen Yu had started. As she plucked the Qin strings, it was as if the strings had spirits of their own, spreading their ethereal sound under her soft and gentle hands to everyone's ears. Her fingers on the Qin strings were like butterflies weaving through the sea of flowers, each turn was well coordinated with nature. Feng and Ning bit her lips. Even if she did not like Shen Yu, she had to admit that Shen Yu's Qin skills were outstanding. Upon comparison, the piece she played to get first rank was very clumsy. This was a piece of missing one's loved ones and homeland but it made Shen Miao to clench her fists. Even if she lived her life again, those who were dead cannot be resurrected. Wan Yu and Fu Ming would no longer appear. Shen Yu's song was like a resentful knell. When one heard it, not only there was no comfort, it was filled with blood enmity. Kai Lin ran out of the banquet as he was thinking of getting closer to the stage so that he can look at every single expression of his beloved. He was drunk in the beautiful Qin sounds when suddenly someone's conversation interrupted. Second young lady is truly unlucky. She has never gotten second place before and the first position was unexpectedly won by fifth young lady with tricks. The one talking was a slender servant, which Kai Lin recognized as Shen Yu's personal maid, so he involuntarily looked over. That's not only it. In addition, fifth young lady did not even want to participate in the selecting category and it's obvious that she is setting herself against second young lady. The other servant said. Unfortunately our second young lady is good-hearted and have suffered a heap of anger from fifth young lady. It was not because of fifth young lady reliance on first master that she could treat second young lady like this. Second young lady is truly pitiful. She has prepared for so long but was robbed of the fruit without any reason. If only someone was able to help second young lady to bend it out. For example, calling fifth young lady to the stage during the challenging category. What nonsense you speak about. The other person interrupted her words. Everyone knows that fifth young lady has no knowledge of the four scholarly arts. If they were to pick fifth young lady, it would be akin to lowering their position. I see that it is not possible for the female group. But if someone on the male group were to challenge her, that would then be bending for second young lady. The conversation gradually softened and Kai Lin's eyes moved. Looking at Shen Yu on the stage, he had an idea in his mind. One song of Shen Yu made everyone listen as if they were drunk and stupefied. Females that had superior chin skills would be loved anywhere, and especially so if this female was pretty. At least in front of the male side of the banquet, grade 1 students were too young, but grade 2s and 3s youths paid a lot of attention over to this side. Even though in Guang Wentang, Qin Qing's beauty was ranked first, but she had a proud temperament and was not as gentle and pleasing as Shen Yu. This older sister of yours plays exceedingly well. Feng and Ning reluctantly said, I do not know where did she hired her Qin teacher. Tomorrow I will also ask mother to find me a famous Qin teacher for lessons. They were all at the young age when their desire to compete was the highest. Just like when Shen Miao just became the empress, she took everything with relaxation except for Fu Shuyi's heart where she controlled it tightly. As long as Fu Shuyi gave a good expression to another female, she would start to worry. Moreover, with all the truth and fiction in the inner palace, one would privately trip and backstab others. She had the temperament of returning the grudges that she received immediately and therefore offended quite a number of people. Currently, this temperament of hers has not changed, but she would not use methods that would hurt herself. Speaking of which, second young lady of Shen family is a rarely seen beauty with talents. Everyone loves beauty and Prince Zhou felt amazed by Shen Yu, but he only said, what a pity. Even though others might not have understood what was there to pity, it was not possible that the few princes present did not understand. Shen Yu was born charming with infinite talents, and to have such a beautiful and eloquent person as a partner, it would perhaps be one of the greatest thing in life. Unfortunately, she did not crawl out of the Shen Furin's womb and was not the daughter of the Shen family's first household but of the third household. Unfortunately, Shen Xin, who had military power in his hands, had such an idiot like Shen Miao for a daughter. Even though she looks a little different today, one's impression was not something that could be changed overnight. They believed that Shen Miao was being guided by someone behind the scenes and was still the idiot who did not know anything else. After Gao Yan stepped down from the stage, Pei Lang gradually calmed down. It was his first encounter in this life for such a situation. Even though he did not understand it, he did his utmost to relieve his anxieties. At the moment when he heard Prince Zhou's words, he could not help but look at the purple-clad young lady at the female side of the banquet. She held a chess piece while being immersed in her thoughts. Even though they were separated a distance and he could not see her eyes, he could feel that those eyes were filled with careful examination and deep intent, as if it was like the time when Shen Miao was looking at him. How could such a person be an idiot? But people would not change overnight, unless it was Shen Miao who put on an act of being silly and stupid. Why would she do so? Even someone as intelligent as him could not think of what was going on. The female group of selection ended with the completion of Shen Yu singing to the moon. Shen Yu naturally had gotten first rank, but today she did not felt happy because of this but felt some embarrassment instead. She glanced at Shen Miao and saw that Shen Miao was engrossed with her chess game and did not even saw her. Shen Yu knew that Shen Miao had no skills in the 4 scholarly arts and would have not known anything about chess. To look so serious today, it was only to deliberately pull her face down. Chen Ruchu took note of her expressions and warned her in a whisper, you have forgotten yourself. Chen Ruchu's expectation for her daughter was that regardless of any situation she must be calm. Whether she was truly calm or acted out, she must always let others see a calm image. When a female had a calm appearance, their temperament would be superior, but if one was flustered, one would not have the bearings of an aristocratic family. In all fairness, Chen Ruchu's method of teaching females was indeed good and she herself did very well. Unfortunately, Shen Yu was still somewhat young and had yet to experience failure, thus she did not understand how to endure it silently. Hearing Chen Ruchu's warning, Shen Yu slightly retracted the anger on her face. The servant at her side served her a cup of tea. May young lady drink a sip of tea to freshen your throat. Shen Yu took the tea over and looked at the servant. The servant smiled at her and Shen Yu understood in her heart before the smile on her face became somewhat real. She said, it is somewhat warm. I am very interested in the next challenge category. Because Shen Qing had gotten first rank in chess, her mood was much more pleasant as she smiled. This year there will not be any differentiation between genders or grades, so the challenges should be more intense. It goes without saying that the challenge round was the most anticipated of the 3. This was because in the drawing lots round, one may not draw the best one. In the selection round, one will pick their best skill to perform. Thus in the challenge round there would always be 2 people competing against each other on their best abilities. Because females tend to be friendly outwardly, they had to portray an indifferent expression to show that they did not value the results of this round. But the males were different. Youths would like to compare with others to determine ranking of one another, and at this age where they were at their most competitive, it would always be the most intense during the yearly challenge round. In this year's challenge round, regardless of female or male, irrespective of grade 2 or 3, all the students could do it together. As long as one wants to challenge another, they could do so. Even though it could be said that male and female could challenge one another, there were most likely no such instances. There were indeed no challenges this year in the literary topics, thus the highlight fell naturally on the military topics. This practically isolated the possibility for female involvement. Even though there was no shortage of daughters of military who has martial arts skills, but as compared to their male counterparts, there was a huge variance and thus one would not be successful. But one was surprised to see that from the male side of the banquet, Kai Ling stood up first and went up the stage. The examiner asked him what area he was challenging. He pointed to the slip of paper that indicated arrow shooting and said, shooting arrows from a distance. It was evident to everyone. This overlord, Kai Lin, was ignorant in literary matters but was considered as outstanding in military skills. In which his shooting skill was the best as he could shoot his targets every single time and was even ranked first in last year's academy examinations on arrow shooting. Who was he going to challenge today? In the audience, there was no one who was more outstanding than him in shooting arrows from a distance. Kai Lin craned his neck and suddenly his hand pointed towards the female side of the banquet. When everyone saw that he was pointing towards the female side of the banquet and not the male side, they were shocked. When they finally saw clearly who he was pointing at, their jaws dropped and even discussions came to a halt. He also intentionally loudly shouted out, I want to challenge her, Shen Miao. That purple-clad young female who was immersed in the chess game raised her head and looked straight at the person on stage with clear bright eyes. Her expression did not seem to fluctuate and there were no mistakes in her actions, as if this earth-shattering sentence was just a casual greeting that she needed not answer. Chen Rushu frowned. She had taught Shen Yu wholeheartedly, but Shen Miao seemed to be the one to have learned to maintain one's composure instead. In the distant pavilion, the handsome youth who was leisurely drinking tea suddenly spurted it all out and there was a trace of surprise in his otherwise frivolous expression. Is that boy from the Kai family crazy? Shen Miao stood up. On the chess game on the table, the black pieces spread across the entire board and were approaching to her. The first pawn has been dispatched. She picked up a white piece and placed it down. The black pieces were swallowed and she threw them cheekily into the bamboo basket. Accepted, she responded. The wind during autumn was usually elegant and fresh, but at this moment because of the tense atmosphere, even the flowery fragrance became stronger. Shen Yu covered her mouth and said, sounding surprised, this fifth younger sister is a female, why would any young lady accept this challenge? Exactly, Chen Ruchu also worriedly said, fifth lady, you must not force yourself. Even though eldest brother-in-law is a general, you all along do not have knowledge of these stuffs. Chen Ruchu's words were said cleverly to get what she desired, to say that Shen Xin was a general but Shen Miao, as his daughter, did not know archery. The reason why females did not like playing with knives and handling spears might be somewhat justified because of not knowing military skills. But if one does not have knowledge in military and literary skills, then one would be quite terrible. Moreover, everyone knew that Shen Miao had no knowledge on the 4 scholarly arts, and to add on by saying that she was not good at military skills, this demoted Shen Miao's reputation to nothing, and one would also slight Shen Xin's household. But the rules for this challenge cannot be changed. Shen Qing looked anxious, but her voice had a tone that was rejoicing in Shen Miao's misfortune. Once an opponent was picked, no matter what the topic was, one must complete the challenge. But everyone would always pick an outstanding person to compete against. Could it be possible that fifth younger sister had a hidden skill? Else why would Kai Lin pick you out? Her words were somewhat piercing. But not only did Ren Wanyan not stop her, she smiled. Eldest daughter is saying nonsense. How would fifth lady know how to play with knives and handle spears? Fifth lady, if you do not wish to go up on stage to compete, then second Shen will personally speak to the academy examiners. You are still young and thinking of eldest brother-in-law's face, they would not make things difficult for you. Even though Ren Wanyan's words sounded as if she was rescuing her lovingly, if one were to think very carefully, it would not be the case. After all, in the academy examinations, there was no one that was the exception. For Shen Miao to be a precedent, most likely the Ding capital residents would start to talk. Moreover, to use Shen Xin's reputation, it might sound to others that Shen Xin used his meritorious efforts to gain privileges. After all, one would conform to the views of the majority, and other than the advantage of having a good identity, there also were lots of disadvantages. And she would never allow anyone to say anything bad about Shen Xin. Thanking second Shen, it is not required. She stood up at the female side of the banquet and slowly walked towards the stage. The entire arena quietened down, and one could clearly hear the young lady's voice as it set off a wave in the arena. I comply to this fight. Kai Lin vision faltered. The reason why he did this was nothing more than wanting to vent it for Shen Yu. In the military topic, it would always be a misfortune for a male to challenge a female. But he was used being a scoundrel, and most likely would be scolded by his own parents when he returned. But thinking of being able to vent it out for Shen Yu made Kai Ling to be delighted from the bottom of his heart. He was thinking that it would be good if Shen Miao did not dare to accept this challenge, he would then ruthlessly ridicule Shen Miao. But one could not imagine that Shen Miao actually accepted the challenge. Not only that, she was portraying such a calm and magnanimous expression. Watching that purple-clad person slowing walking up the stage, Kai Lin's heart felt strange. It was as if she had no fear. But how could that be possible? Shen Miao did not know archery, and he knew it better than anyone. For someone who had never practiced martial arts, naturally they would be ignorant about it. Shen Miao could possibly not even know how to properly hold a bow, and in the face of something that one was not good at and had never tried before, anyone would panic. She could actually keep up the act to such a point. Just as Kai Lin was pondering, he suddenly felt a pair of eyes on him. He turned and met with Shen Yu's eyes from the female side of the banquet. When Shen Yu saw him looking over, she got embarrassed and lowered her head. Kai Lin's heart was captivated by that one scene. Every youth's heart had a lovely dream of being a hero saving a beauty. As of now, in Kai Lin's eyes, he was that hero who stood out on behalf of the beauty, and as for Shen Miao, she was that evil and ugly villain. Regardless of whether she accepted or declined this challenge, he would definitely make Shen Miao lose all of her face, and her embarrassment would be in full view of everyone. This was to make her not to run rampant in front of Shen Yu again. Generally speaking, the topic on challenging was that the person who challenged would set the rules and also dictate on how the challenge would be carried out, and the person who was challenged could only accept it. So, because no one knew how it would develop, in every year this round would attract the highest amount of attention. Shen Miao walked up the stage. The chief examiner of the academy examinations was in a somewhat difficult situation. Shen Miao was after all a delicate little young lady. It was justifiable for female and male to challenge each other in the literary topics, but for military ones, it was feared that Kai Lin was deliberately making a fool out of her. Today's play is extremely good. Prince Zhou clapped his hands, seemingly showing his interest. I am afraid that the reputation of Shen family's first household would fall 1,000 zhong. Prince Jing shook his head and sighed. General Shen's good reputation was gained in the battlefield, but his daughter is failing to live up to expectations. In Prince Jing's heart, it was not only she failed to live up to expectations and was also actually very silly. It was obvious that it would be wrong for her to either accept or decline the challenge, and with that kind of attitude, whatever that followed next would be even more laughable. Kai Lin's lips complacently curled up. This year I have thought up of an interesting rule, since it would be boring to follow the usual rules. The archery challenge this year would be for us to shoot at one another. You put a fruit on top of your head and I will shoot you with an arrow, after which I will then put one on my head and you shoot me. What about it? When those words were said, the entire arena went into an uproar. That examiner jumped in shock. This could result in death. Shen Miao was ultimately Shen Xin's daughter, and if anything happened to her, when Shen Xin returned at the end of the year, who could be able to handle him if he were to look into it? He quickly said, Student Kai. Kai Lin waved his hand. Teacher, Guang Wentang does not prioritize specifically for anyone. It is the case for previous regulations for the challenger to define the rules. So why? A dignified Grand General's daughter is such a timid younger generation. Shen Yu lowered her head and covered her tilted lips. Feng and Ning frowned, but she did not know what to do. His words are not wrong. The voice was somewhat hoarse, but it was from Prince Yu, who had kept his eyes closed all the time. There was a trace of an eccentric smile on his grim face as he said, naturally there was no argument that rules are meant to be fixed specifically for anyone. Is it possible that in the battlefield, because the enemy is strong, General Shen would